adventures, starting with American TV series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201, Hiding in the Dark. Casting an invisibility spell, Locke pushed open the wooden door leading to the next level. After passing a corridor, he arrived at the final room. His first notice was the massive, full-length glass mirror. He knew the magician was there. The mirror, seemingly called the Mirror of Eris, stood nearly 4 meters tall, framed in a golden arch, supported by claw-like wooden legs. Carved into the mirror were the words, Eris, Eru, Aetube, Kafru, Aeton, Voorhees. Reading these words backwards, they meant, I reflect not your face, but the longing of your heart. Professor Quirrell, with a certain amount of pride, explained to Harry that he was the mastermind behind the scenes. Harry's suspicions were misplaced. Now, what is this mirror for? Professor Quirrell had no idea of the Mirror of Eris' mechanism. He simply frowned, searching for clues. Locke knew that while the mirror looked magical, it was actually merely enchanted to permanently capture divine thoughts. The true treasure lay within the Philosopher's Stone. Furthermore, only those who harbored no ulterior motives for using the stone could obtain it from the mirror. Locke was deeply interested in the stone, even believing he could find it by force. However, considering the plot, Locke felt that even if he obtained it, he would likely be unable to keep it. After all, the entire plot was orchestrated by Dumbledore, who was likely keeping an eye on the situation. It would be difficult to steal the stone from under his nose. He still planned to stay in the wizarding world for a while, so offending Dumbledore at this moment was not a good option. I can see I have the stone, but how do I get it? Professor Quirrell said anxiously, looking into the mirror. Use that boy, a deep voice suddenly spoke. As if receiving a hint, Professor Quirrell looked at Harry Potter and shouted, Harry Potter, come here, now. Professor Quirrell called Harry Potter to the mirror, and Harry saw himself pulling a Philosopher's Stone from his pocket. The next moment, he noticed something else in his pocket. The scene reflected in the mirror could only be seen by the person themselves, so Professor Quirrell stared at Harry and said, Tell me, what did you see? I saw myself winning the House Cup and shaking hands with Dumbledore. Harry, a clever man, had come up with a lie. He's lying, the deep voice resounded, noticing Harry Potter's subtle movements and prompting Professor Quirrell to remove his scarf, exposing Harry Potter's subtle plan. Discovered, Harry Potter turned to flee, but Quirrell, as if seeing through Harry's thoughts, snapped his fingers, and a wall of fire erupted on the steps before Harry. Professor Quirrell was about to capture Harry Potter when Locke suddenly shook his hand, sending a silent, sharp blade careening towards Professor Quirrell. The blade sliced through Quirrell's shoulder almost instantly. Before he could feel the pain, Quirrell's arm, which was about to grab Harry Potter, vanished, tumbling through the air and landing on Harry's chest. Harry instinctively caught it, and when he saw what it was, he dropped his arm to the ground in terror and quickly retreated. Professor Quirrell had barely felt the pain, letting out a scream. Then Locke unleashed another exploding weapon spell, sending the wand at Professor Quirrell's waist spinning and shattering. Harry Potter stared in shock at the sudden change before him. Noticing that the severed arm on the ground had suddenly lost its moisture, drying up and crumbling into dust. At that moment, Professor Quirrell seemed to notice Locke and glanced towards him. Seeing the arm's transformation, Locke, with a sudden thought, switched his initial spell to a simple repulse. Stung by the blow, Professor Quirrell's body lurched, and he charged towards Harry Potter. Instinctively, Harry Potter raised his hands and pushed against Professor Quirrell's head. The moment Harry's hands made contact, Professor Quirrell let out a heartbreaking scream, and the face Voldemort had transformed into began to crack, spreading rapidly. Professor Quirrell's scream was only half uttered. Then, as if powerless, he was pushed backward by Harry, cracks spreading all over his body. He suddenly turned to dust, his clothes falling to the ground under the force of gravity. Harry stared at the scene in front of him, then at the powder, then down at his hands. Damn it, who the hell is that? At this moment, Voldemort's deep voice suddenly rang out. Locke's previous series of attacks was too smooth, and Voldemort had no time to react. Professor Quirrell was completely dead. As expected, Harry possessed the magic left by his mother, which perfectly restrained Voldemort's remaining spirit. If Voldemort's spirit were intact, perhaps he wouldn't be affected so severely, but it was incomplete, and therefore could only be restrained by Harry. This was the origin of the prophecy concerning Harry. As Locke thought, accompanied by a roar, a whirlwind suddenly arose, and a black mist began to gather. Expecto Patronus, Locke no longer hid. He revealed himself, conjuring a nearly 2-meter-long bird, gleaming with a silver glow. It darted fiercely toward the black mist. Like a sharp arrow, the magical bird pierced through the black mist of Voldemort's remnant soul, piercing through it in a single stroke, breaking the fog's formation. Ah! Voldemort screamed as the remnant's black mist dispersed, but he immediately struggled to regroup. But Locke, with a thought, summoned the magical bird once again. Screams continued to emanate, and each time the bird passed through it, the black mist's gathering speed slowed. In between, Locke cast various other spells, but for a long time, the black mist showed no sign of dissipating. Clearly, these ordinary offensive spells were incapable of completely destroying the black mist formed by Voldemort's remnant soul. Locke frowned, knowing that ordinary spells had limited damage to the remnant soul. He still needed to attack it from the very soul itself. He was about to use the fiery blaze charm, but subconsciously glanced at a corner of the room. It was empty, but Locke instinctively felt that there should be someone there. If nothing unexpected happened, it should be Dumbledore, hiding there. Chapter 202 Dumbledore's New Idea. Finding Dumbledore hiding in the shadows wasn't entirely surprising. After all, the series of traps the trio had navigated to reach this point were more of a test than a true means of stopping Voldemort. Locke hesitated over whether to demonstrate his knowledge of the Fiend Fire before Dumbledore. However, recalling the renowned exploits of previous Fiend Fire users, Locke raised his hand and ultimately chose to cast the Divine Fire Charm. While Locke could cast spells without a spell, he could do so without diminishing the power of ordinary magic, but Divine Fire was different. Without the spell, the power of Divine Fire was greatly reduced. So, while using his mind to control the magical birds to entangle Voldemort's spirit, he extended his finger and muttered a spell, a bright flame appearing at his fingertips. Sensing something amiss, Voldemort's spirit attempted to gather speed and escape, but Locke acted swiftly. The flames emanating from his fingertips expanded as the spell concluded, enveloping the misty remnant. Almost instantly, after a faint, short scream, Voldemort's spirit vanished into thin air. The walls of fire surrounding the room finally died down, leaving only the Divine Fire Locke had cast in the air. Chanting another spell, Locke extinguished the Divine Fire before turning to Harry. "I thought you were just curious due to your age, but I didn't expect you'd get into so much trouble. If Hermione hadn't informed me, I wouldn't have known. The Dark Lord is a renowned figure in the wizarding world. As students, it's best for you to keep your distance." Harry was lost in thought, seemingly still recovering from the situation. Locke glanced at him, unsure if he'd taken his words in. "All right, it's resolved, but we still need to report it to the school. After all, what happened wasn't a small matter. And there's the Philosopher's Stone in your pocket. I wonder how many wizards would want it." "Even I'm tempted." Locke gave Harry a meaningful look, causing him to unconsciously clutch his hand. Then, leaving him alone, he turned back. He didn't specifically pay attention to Dumbledore's hiding place, not wanting him to know what he'd noticed. For the time being, leaving a good impression would be helpful to Locke's plan. The remnant of Voldemort had been restrained by Harry, and Locke hadn't hesitated to attack by surprise, so he was eliminated without even exerting any power. It was a truly humiliating death. In fact, Voldemort's portrayal as a boss in many films and TV series has always been a bit lacking. Although he seems terrifying and impressive in various depictions, and many wizards tremble in fear at his mention, the process of killing the remnants of Voldemort's spirits is completely unworthy of his status. The first impression one gets is, "That's it, teacher." Returning to the wizard chess room, Hermione immediately came over to hold Locke's arm, as if to check if Locke was injured, and asked, "Did you guys deal with Snape?" "Ouch." Hermione was hit on the head by Locke. She rubbed her head and said, "Why did you hit me all of a sudden? This is to teach you a lesson. The mastermind behind this is not Snape, but Professor Quirrell. He is possessed by Voldemort," Locke said. "This is to teach you a lesson. I told you before, Snape would never hurt Harry. You guys were making random assumptions and almost got hurt. Don't do that again in the future." "I understand." Hermione was still a little unconvinced. But facing Locke's serious gaze, she could only nod obediently. As for Ron, who had just woken up, he still didn't understand why he suddenly became Professor Quirrell. Thinking of this, he looked at Harry with a questioning look, hoping for an answer. But Harry was still so absorbed in what he had just experienced that he didn't notice Ron's glance. Ron's wink was like a blind man's. At this moment, Dumbledore finally arrived, accompanied by several professors. Locke had no idea how he'd managed it. Hogwarts was covered in anti-apparition charms. Was he too powerful, or had he left himself a backdoor? Glancing at the others, Dumbledore said to the still-dazed Harry, "How are you, Harry? Are you hurt? You don't look well." "No, I mean, I'm fine," Harry Potter said quickly, coming to his senses. It was Professor Quirrell who broke in here. "I mean, I only knew it was Professor Quirrell until I saw him. We'd been suspecting Professor Snape. Professor Quirrell seemed to be possessed by Voldemort." Harry recounted the events in a somewhat disjointed manner, and Dumbledore guided the conversation with appropriate questions until everyone finally understood the general situation. "So what Harry said is right, right?" Dumbledore looked at Locke after Harry finished speaking. "Did you destroy Tom's soul?" "I used the divine fire charm," Locke shrugged and said. "Ordinary magic has limited effects. I tried many spells, but they were ineffective on Voldemort's soul. At most, they hindered his movements. But the divine fire charm was effective immediately. The divine fire charm is not that easy to learn. Ordinary wizards who graduated from Hogwarts don't even have the qualifications to learn it," Dumbledore said with a look of regret. "Mr. Locke, your talent is much better than what your graduation transcript showed. I just suddenly got it. A few months ago, I was attacked by a Death Eater. Since then, I have put all my attention on learning magic. Because I am just an ordinary Muggle-born, I have no relatives in the wizarding world to rely on. I can only work hard and use magic to protect myself," Locke answered indifferently, using his past experience and Muggle background to imply that he could not be a Death Eater. Dumbledore didn't dwell on the matter of the sacred fire charm. He then questioned Locke, Ron, and Hermione several more times before confirming the entire situation. He realized that Locke's presence was due to Hermione's request for help. Thinking that he grew more suspicious with age, Dumbledore determined that Locke's involvement was simply a coincidence due to his close relationship with Hermione. His past seemed completely incompatible with the Death Eaters. Recalling Locke's attack by Death Eaters, Dumbledore didn't press the issue further. He remembered that Locke had donated money to the school afterward and had subsequently spent a significant amount of time in the library. Professors could always be seen in the library, studying various magical books, almost obsessing over them. It seemed Locke possessed considerable magical talent. After all, the sacred fire charm wasn't easy to learn, at least among Hogwarts professors. The number of those capable of performing it could be counted on one hand. Thinking of this, Dumbledore thought that perhaps he could win over Locke and ask him to join him in fighting Voldemort. After all, he had already destroyed a remnant of Voldemort's soul. And there was no room for easing the tension between him and Voldemort. With this thought in mind, Dumbledore looked at Harry and said, "All right, Mr. Locke, you and Professor McGonagall, take Harry and the others to the infirmary for a checkup. I need to take care of the situation here." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203: Cooperation between the two parties. Together with Professor McGonagall, they led the three to the infirmary. Madame Pomfrey examined them and confirmed they were all alright. Harry, looking disheveled, had only minor injuries. Ron had been unconscious from concussion and shock, and Hermione was unharmed. Harry Potter, though many considered him flawed, was nonetheless kind and innocent. He took this opportunity to speak to Ron and Hermione about his misunderstanding of Snape and expressed his gratitude to Locke. According to the plot, Locke added, "Professor Snape is certainly strict, but he wouldn't intentionally harm you. Just remember that." The three, overcome with guilt, nodded repeatedly. Locke didn't elaborate, as he wasn't familiar with Snape and any further comment might have irritated the three. He quickly changed the subject, saying, "All right, we've checked you all out. I'll ask Madame Pomfrey if you can return home and recuperate." After saying this, Locke pointed at the three people again, and the next moment, their once dirty and torn clothes were instantly restored to pristine condition. Truthfully, Locke often found this restoration spell quite miraculous, even restoring items worn out by the passage of time. The next day passed uneventfully, with no one approaching Locke to speak. That was until the following afternoon, when an origami crane flew to Locke, bearing the command to the headmaster's office. Seeing this command, Locke knew he would soon face Dumbledore. "Come in," Dumbledore's voice echoed from the headmaster's office after a knock. "Good afternoon, Headmaster." Locke opened the door and greeted Dumbledore. "Good afternoon," Dumbledore nodded, motioning Locke to sit down at the coffee table. "What would you like to drink?" "A cup of tea would be just fine," Locke said, undeterred. He sat down before Dumbledore, took the tea he offered, and took a sip. "I imagine you've heard of Tom's reputation. Would you like to hear how he became the Dark Lord?" Dumbledore said with a smile. "It would be my pleasure." Although he already knew this from the plot, Locke still listened attentively. Dumbledore then proceeded to recount Voldemort's story from the very beginning, from his school days to his rise as Dark Lord and his suppression of the British wizarding world. He also explained the protective spell on Harry. Dumbledore also explained that he had been keeping an eye on Harry, so that he could find Voldemort's Horcruxes and destroy them one by one, because Harry's fate was intertwined with Voldemort's. Even the Philosopher's Stone was a deliberate bait he had placed to lure Voldemort. It could be said that Dumbledore's unexpected candor actually endeared Locke to him. As a key character in the novel, while he had his fair share of calculations, he was generally a decent man, somewhat different from the online opinions of his previous life, such as the old silver coin. Finally, Dumbledore solemnly stated, "Professor Trelawney once made 2 prophecies regarding how Voldemort would be destroyed. The first prophecy foretold that Voldemort would meet his defeat at the hands of Harry, and the second prophecy," Dumbledore hesitated for a moment before continuing, "the prophecy foretold that Voldemort would return and bring darkness to the wizarding world, but he would ultimately die at Harry's hands." Raising an eyebrow, Locke asked, "Headmaster, do you mean that you want me to minimize my involvement in Harry's affairs to prevent any changes to the prophecy?" "Not at all," Dumbledore shook his head. "I do intend to train Harry to become independent and ultimately defeat Voldemort, and I believe you could provide the best assistance in dealing with Voldemort." A sudden shift in his thoughts suggested that Dumbledore had seen through his previous demonstrations that he was capable of fighting Voldemort. The Divine Fire Curse was not a spell that could be mastered by ordinary wizards. The number of wizards who could master it was limited to a handful, and such proficiency was more than enough to defeat Voldemort. Dumbledore was confident he could still suppress Voldemort, but he was too old, and his strength was actually declining with the passage of time. Voldemort, however, possessed a Horcrux, which had damaged his soul, but his strength after his resurrection would not diminish with age. Therefore, in their conflict, time was clearly on Voldemort's side, which was why Dumbledore wanted to train Harry Potter, preparing him to face Voldemort. However, from the beginning of his schooling, Dumbledore had observed that Harry's wizarding talent was decent, but not top tier. The key was that he lacked the determination to fully develop his abilities. Ultimately, Harry was still just an ordinary boy, and expecting him to mature quickly, truly understand the importance of strength, and study diligently was not easy. However, the sudden appearance of Locke presented Dumbledore with another opportunity. Locke's strength was now comparable to Voldemort's. Especially since Locke was so young, still rapidly developing, and already antagonizing the Death Eaters. If he could join the fight against Voldemort, even if Harry hadn't matured, he could become a key force in the fight. "So, child, I would like to invite you to join the fight against Voldemort," Dumbledore said solemnly. "You're the child?" Locke rolled his eyes inwardly, but considering Dumbledore's age and seniority, calling Locke a child was perfectly acceptable. "It would be my honor." After a moment's reflection, Locke didn't refuse the offer of joining the fight against Voldemort. The system's mission had naturally set Locke against Voldemort, and joining at this point would have many advantages. After all, Dumbledore had been the most renowned wizard in the wizarding world for many years. His private collection of magical knowledge, as well as his accumulated reputation and connections, were considerable. These would be of great benefit to Locke, so naturally he wouldn't refuse such an offer. Perhaps he had been prepared for this moment, but he hadn't expected Dumbledore to be so decisive, making the decision in just a day. He could understand Dumbledore's reluctance to invite him to join the Order of the Phoenix immediately. After all, it takes time to gain familiarity and trust. In any case, the two sides' plans were a perfect match, and the subsequent conversation between the two was a delightful one. When Locke left, he received some of Dumbledore's personal collection of magic books. At the same time, Dumbledore also opened the room of requirement for Locke to practice various spells. Just the initial gains made Locke quite satisfied. Chapter 204, Not Enough. Over the next period, Locke began studying the various more powerful spells he had received from Dumbledore, many of which lay beyond the reach of ordinary wizards. The private collection of books Dumbledore had given Locke contained highly advanced, less widely circulated magical knowledge, and contained dangerous spells that were exceptionally difficult to learn. This collection also contained extensive alchemical knowledge, including works by Nicholas Flamel, which Locke benefited greatly from. This also gave Locke the opportunity to build closer relationships with most of the professors at the house, consulting them on various magical matters. Time passed quickly, and at the end of term dinner, Dumbledore, as in the original plot, displayed obvious favoritism, maneuvering various ways to give the three main characters significant house points. This excessive favoritism was perceived by everyone, but Dumbledore remained unfazed. Given his reputation, he could handle the pressure. Locke understood that this method was intended to boost Harry Potter's confidence and foster a deeper sense of belonging to the house. The effectiveness of this was a matter of opinion. Because of this apparent favoritism, Slytherin, originally ranked first, was overshadowed, and Gryffindor's Red Lion banner would be displayed in the Great Hall for the entire year. Snape was momentarily stunned, as Dumbledore hadn't informed him beforehand. However, this behavior had some negative consequences, making Harry a thorn in the side of many. Fortunately, Slytherin House tended to be arrogant and domineering, and many members looked down on students from other houses, earning them considerable resentment. This had already incurred significant animosity from the other three houses. Consequently, most of the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff students couldn't help but celebrate, finally seeing the hated Slytherin House's run on the House Cup come to an end. At the end of the semester, in addition to studying magic, Locke also contacted several people through Dumbledore. Mr. Scamander, nice to meet you. I'm Locke Lee. It's a bit presumptuous of me to contact you through Headmaster Dumbledore this time. Locke couldn't help but frown halfway through his words. Why did he feel that there was something wrong with Newt Scamander? He just stared at him and didn't say anything when they first met. Mr. Scamander, Locke reminded him, and Scamander came back to his senses and said, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little dazed at my age. How could that be? I think you're in good spirits, Mr. Scamander. Locke exchanged a few polite words with the other party, and then followed him to the living room, where there were prepared refreshments. After sitting down, Scamander said, I heard from Dumbledore that you came to me because you have an idea for the magical materials produced at the Dragon Farm in Romania. That's right, Locke smiled. I have a potion shop and a magical materials store in Diagon Alley. Sometimes I get delayed by material issues, so I want to work directly with the source. Locke made no secret of his purpose. It was impossible to hide. Of course, he said he just wanted to cooperate, but in reality he wanted to monopolize the relevant materials, mainly to keep them for himself. His dimension was already filled with a mountain of gold, so galleons meant nothing to him. This time, he was leveraging Dumbledore's connections just to get a chance to buy shares in the Dragon Farm, and even get some dragons to raise himself. So that's how it is. Are you planning to cooperate with the Dragon Farm? Indeed, if possible, I'd like to contract all the materials produced by the Dragon Farm. I'm hoping Mr. Scamander can act as the middleman. Material production at the Dragon Farm is a big business, Scamander said thoughtfully. It's not that easy for you to contract it all on your own, Locke said. I've checked some of the information before. Taming dragons is no easy task. It's costly, and there are accidents from time to time. The cost is very high. The Ministry of Magic's support for the Dragon Farm is very limited, not enough to sustain its operations. That's why we have to rely on selling materials to subsidize the expenses. If successful, the price is not a problem. I'm even willing to increase the current purchase price by 30%. As long as it succeeds, I'm willing to pay you, Mr. Scamander, a brokerage fee. I believe with this money, you can use it for many of the things you want to accomplish. 30%. That's a lot of money. Scamander was slightly surprised. If you're really willing to offer that price, I think Bill will definitely agree. Managing a dragon farm isn't easy. They have to prevent dragons from running amok, and they have to contend with poaching by dark wizards. Furthermore, since employee salaries can't be high, the farm has long been understaffed. If Locke truly raises the purchase price, it would solve a significant portion of its problems. At this point, Scamander turned to Locke. But are you going to do this at a loss? Besides dealing in materials, I also have a lot of magical experiments to conduct. which can be costly. For me, profit is secondary. The key is ensuring that my experiments aren't halted due to lack of materials. I see. If that's the case, I think Bill would be happy to agree to your request. Well, I'll go with you. Wait a minute while I contact someone I know to apply for international flu access. Thank you very much, Mr. Scamander, Locke said with a smile. While Scamander contacted someone and waited for news, Locke detailed the brokerage fee. Even though Scamander wasn't particularly interested in money, the information intrigued him, and his motivation to act increased. The two men's journey to the Romanian dragon farm went smoothly. Although they encountered the Aurors inspecting the facility upon entry, they were merely questioned and warned before being allowed to pass. Later, with Scamander's enthusiastic assistance, Locke met with Gates, the current manager of the dragon farm. Locke's proposed contract price was significantly higher than what they could have obtained by selling the materials themselves, so Gates, after careful consideration, quickly agreed to Locke's terms. Locke's offer would significantly improve the farm's operational problems. With sufficient funds, they could offer higher salaries to the dragon trainers and stockpile more necessary magical items to combat poaching by dark wizards. After the agreement was reached, Locke met Gates privately again and even received some special treatment, including assistance in dealing with violent dragons. Locke could only remark that no wizard could withstand the galleons, and if they could, then the offer was simply not enough. Chapter 205 Boarding the Ship. Dragons, such magical creatures, are truly treasures. Dumbledore discovered 12 uses for their blood alone. A dragon, in the hands of a knowledgeable wizard, could be fully utilized, with no waste. Naturally, Locke chose a powerful magical contract and also raised the penalty for breach of contract at the dragon training grounds to an extremely high level. Locke had no intention of raising the price significantly, or even profiting from it. Galleons were meaningless to him. He primarily relied on this method to stockpile materials and perhaps even to find a way to acquire live dragons. Beyond the dragon training grounds, Locke subsequently leveraged Dumbledore's reputation, using galleons to pave the way, using various methods to collect various magical animals and potion ingredients, seemingly aiming to completely wipe out the wizarding world. Most of the work went smoothly, but a few encountered some problems, but Locke remained patient, observing patiently and waiting for the right opportunity. After traveling across the wizarding world for most of the holiday, Locke finally flew back to Diagon Alley. Teacher, Hermione, having already received the news, had no time to study or practice potion making. She was already waiting in Diagon Alley. The moment she saw Locke, she ran over excitedly. Long time no see, Hermione. You look like you had a great holiday. You seem to have grown a little taller, Locke smiled, stroking Hermione's hair. I've already booked a restaurant. I'd love to hear about your holiday and any interesting experiences. Sure, Hermione happily agreed. She actually loved having someone listen to her talk. After not seeing each other for so long, she had a lot to share with Locke. The next day after his return, Locke went to Hogwarts to meet with Dumbledore. He had been using Dumbledore as a banner for many of his errands, and now that he was done, he had to give him some instructions. After a conversation, Locke offered to donate 20,000 galleons to Hogwarts annually, which delighted Dumbledore, who wished he had more outstanding graduates like Locke. Of course, Dumbledore was so easy to talk to, and Locke's recent actions hadn't been overtly problematic, all under the guise of business or potion making. If he were truly messing around, Dumbledore would have immediately disciplined Locke and made him behave himself. During their conversation, Locke had actually tentatively considered becoming a school trustee, offering to provide more funding, but Dumbledore politely declined. Frankly, Locke's influence in the wizarding world wasn't strong enough yet. He figured once he could publicly control Voldemort, many of the current troubles would become smoother. Teacher, when will I be able to cast spells silently like you, even without a wand or ring? Watching Locke practicing his magic, Hermione's eyes shone with admiration, her adoration for Locke reaching a peak ever since she learned he had slain Voldemort's spirit. Don't worry, as long as you practice meditation well, you'll definitely be able to do it in the future. Everyone has their strengths, just like your talent for potion making, which I can't compare to. Locke smiled and said, by the way, I've also discussed it with Headmaster Dumbledore and hired a wizard to work in the shop. He can answer some magical questions from time to time. He'll be here soon, huh? I can just ask you if I have any questions, teacher? Why, ding dong. Just then, the doorbell rang. Locke had already made arrangements, and two elves went to open the door to greet them. Locke, leading a pouting Hermione to the living room, happened to see Dumbledore with someone. Professor Dumbledore. Seeing Dumbledore, Hermione could only greet him politely and sat down next to Locke, all the while observing the wizard who had come with Dumbledore. Lupin is my friend. I'm glad you're willing to hire him, so I brought him here right away. I hope I didn't disturb you, Dumbledore said politely to Locke. Of course not. It's an honor to have someone as talented as Lupin join us. Locke smiled and looked at Lupin, who had come with Dumbledore. Mr. Lupin, it's a pleasure to meet you. I should be the one happy, Lupin said. You should know my situation. To be honest, I'm surprised and a little surprised that you're willing to offer me a job. That's not surprising. Mr. Lupin, you're an excellent wizard, fully capable of handling the work in the shop. I also hope to have someone to answer my magical questions. Mr. Locke, you're too polite. Professor Dumbledore told me you're very powerful. You even destroyed Voldemort's spirit not long ago. Due to his werewolf identity, Lupin had difficulty finding a job, so he was grateful to Locke for hiring him. Besides, the compensation Locke offered was quite generous. The meeting started off well and went smoothly. Locke knew that letting Lupin come to work was actually a test for Dumbledore. He had been quite active during this holiday, and Dumbledore needed to arrange for someone close to him to learn more about Locke's work. Locke was fully aware of this, but he didn't refuse. Lupin was a highly skilled wizard, and logically, finding work wouldn't be easy. It was simply because of his werewolf identity that many people were wary. After agreeing to Lupin's arrival at the shop the next day, Locke escorted Dumbledore and Lupin to the door. After watching them apparate away, Locke sighed, I'm completely on board now. I'm sure there'll be plenty of Death Eaters causing trouble in the future. Leveraging Dumbledore's reputation had its pros and cons. Locke had already reaped the benefits, but the downside was that the Death Eaters would undoubtedly label Locke a die-hard Dumbledore supporter. However, this was his mission in this world, and Voldemort was merely a minor figure among the villains of the universe. People like Uchiha Madara and the Purple Potato Spirit were far more formidable. In the future, Locke would undoubtedly face many more villains, even protagonists, from various worlds. No matter what, one's own strength is the key. All fears come from the lack of one's own strength. With Locke's current strength, he may need to be more careful when facing Voldemort, but it does not mean that he cannot cope with it. Chapter 206 Hostility. Lupin's profound magical skills made him seem stubborn to many, but this only demonstrated his unwavering resolve. Otherwise, how could he have persevered in such an environment? Many details about magic aren't usually detailed in books, but Locke was able to fill in the blanks by consulting Lupin. Locke couldn't just turn to Dumbledore for advice on every little thing. As for the other Hogwarts professors, he also had to consider their moods and relationships, as this wouldn't save Dumbledore's reputation. Now, as Lupin's employer, Locke was even more helpful, and Lupin had no problem asking him for advice on any magical matters. Lupin was adept at the advanced transfiguration technique known as the animagus. While he might not be willing to teach Locke about the dark arts, he didn't mind explaining transfiguration in detail. Teacher, let's go for a walk, Hermione said to Locke with some anticipation. School's about to start, and I haven't packed some things yet. Okay, Locke smiled and nodded at Hermione's eager eyes. Hermione had spent most of her vacation either studying magic or brewing potions, so she definitely deserved a walk. Sure, since you're already a second year, why don't you get a flying broom? We can see if there's one you like, Locke suggested. No, teacher, I'm not a big fan of flying brooms, Hermione shook her head. Locke nodded, not trying to persuade her. Flying brooms are all the rage in the wizarding world, and young wizards your age consider a good flying broom a fashion trend. But Hermione didn't seem too impressed. He'd actually tried one before, and it wasn't uncomfortable, as some netizens had joked. The magic on the broom formed an invisible cushion, like a seat, so it felt like a normal seat. Locke didn't like it primarily because it didn't suit his aesthetic. Wait a minute, then. I'll go change. Seeing Locke agree, Hermione happily ran back to her room at Locke's. As they grew more familiar with each other, Hermione would occasionally stay overnight at Locke's. The Grangers noticed at first, but gradually, they stopped caring. Perhaps it was one time when she was putting on her clothes that she noticed Locke staring at her for a moment longer. When she was staying at Locke's, she often wore white tights, but when she went out, she would change into something else. With the start of school approaching, Many young wizards and witches came with their families to buy new school supplies. Hermione, draped in a wizard's robe, maintained her composure, but her face was filled with visible joy and excitement. The two of them first wandered around Diagon Alley before finally arriving at Flourish and Blots. However, as they neared a bookstore, they noticed a commotion breaking out inside, with a fight going on. "That's Harry and Ron." Hermione quickly recognized one of the parties and instinctively drew her wand. "Leave it to me," Locke restrained Hermione, forcing her to put away her wand. The Ministry of Magic forbade wizards from engaging in magical duels in Diagon Alley, and Hermione's wand would have been too conspicuous. As Hermione put her wand away, Locke, with a thought, cast a silent restraining spell, immobilizing Lucius Malfoy, who was fighting with Ron's father, Arthur. Arthur then delivered several vicious blows. Noticing Lucius was restrained, Arthur paused. Lucius, looking around but unable to determine who had cast the spell, glared at Arthur with hatred. "Looks like you've found a good helper. Don't be so lucky next time, Harry, Ron." At this moment, Hermione approached and greeted Harry and the others. Lucius then noticed Hermione and Locke, who were with her. "Who are you?" Lucius glanced at the newly emerged Locke, casting his suspicions on him. "Locke Lee, nice to meet you, Mr. Lucius Malfoy." Locke greeted him as if nothing had happened. "Fighting in the street doesn't seem to be in keeping with the noble elegance of pure-blood families, Locke Lee." Lucius was stunned for a moment, then he remembered a wizard who had appeared out of nowhere and had been very active recently. He was said to have a close relationship with Dumbledore, and there were rumors that he was the descendant of Dumbledore's friend. Judging from the man's expression, Lucius probably guessed that Locke had probably secretly cast a binding spell on him, which gave him a fierce look. His conflict with Locke wasn't just about Locke's covert use of the binding spell. The key issue is that Locke had contracted the materials for the dragon taming farm. Since then, the prices of all dragon-related materials have increased. While the price increase in stores might not be significant, it still caused many wizards to panic buy. Locke, in particular, had accumulated a significant amount of materials for his own use during this process, and the materials released for market circulation were only half of their original value, leading to privately inflated prices for many materials reaching 2 or 3 times their original value. A large portion of the Malfoy family's business was related to dragon materials, but Locke's actions had significantly reduced their income. Furthermore, Locke had donated a large sum of money to Hogwarts, foiling the Malfoy family's attempt to exploit the financial crisis to force Dumbledore to cede more power. It could be said that although the two sides had never met before, the animosity between them was already established. Locke, familiar with the plot and the business relationships between various magical families, understood this, and therefore had not hesitated to help Arthur. In this situation, Lucius knew he had suffered a setback. After all, he couldn't use his wand in public at this moment. Before leaving, Lucius glanced at Locke. "Opposing a pure-blood family is not a good idea, Mr. Locke." Locke raised an eyebrow, but said nothing further. He knew the Malfoys had been lobbying the Ministry of Magic regarding the Dragon Farm materials. But Locke had Dumbledore on his side, and the trade agreement would be beneficial to the farm. If Malfoy wanted to persuade the Ministry of Magic to take action, empty words would be enough. Pure-blood families held a significant stake in the wizarding world, and Locke's actions would inevitably affect their interests. Therefore, Locke had anticipated the hostility between the two sides. Whether in the world of ordinary people or wizards, profit is always the most powerful motivator. Given sufficient profit, it's not unimaginable for all wizards to unite and attack Voldemort. Chapter 207 Shoot the Idiot to Death. "Hello, Mr. Locke, I'm Arthur Weasley. Thank you for your help," Arthur Weasley said as he stepped forward to greet Locke. "Nothing, I don't really like that guy either," Locke said with a smile. After exchanging pleasantries with Arthur, they parted ways, each going their own way. Locke took Hermione shopping, and then, before the start of the new semester, he took her on a few days of fun before returning to Hogwarts. With Professor Quirrell's death, Hogwarts had, as usual, appointed a new defense against the dark arts professor. To Locke, the new professor, Gilderoy Lockhart, looked like a peacock in heat. He dressed extravagantly and had his hair styled. Somehow, in the candlelight, his hair shone with a variety of colors. It was as if Locke had clearly noticed his hair glowing green the first time they met, and he maliciously wondered if this meant something. Shortly after the start of the semester, Harry and Ron made a big splash. Not only were they spotted driving a speeding car by ordinary people, but they also crashed into the school's Whomping Willow. The Whomping Willow is an extremely rare magical creature, each of its branches capable of being crafted into a powerful wand. It is considered a prized possession of the house. Hermione, upon hearing this incident, expressed some concern about the punishment the two would face, and sought information from Locke. Apart from this incident, the beginning of the new term was relatively peaceful until after dinner that day, when Locke was about to return to his room when he heard a startled cry. Looking in the direction of the sound, Locke quickly spotted Harry standing there, somewhat bewildered. On the wall beside him, 2 words, seemingly written in blood, read, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." Everyone also noticed Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris, hanging upside down from a nearby metal candlestick, her body stiff and her fur standing on end. Seeing this, Locke knew the basilisk had been released from the chamber and launched its first attack within the castle. Such a public event couldn't be concealed, especially during such a crowded time. Word quickly spread among the students, drawing the attention of professors and even Dumbledore. Dumbledore immediately noticed the blood-red writing on the wall and ordered without hesitation, "All students, return to your dormitories, except Harry." After the students had left, Dumbledore addressed Filch, who was worried about his pet. "Calm down, she's only petrified." As he finished speaking, Professor Lockhart, who had been observing the scene for a while, suddenly looked annoyed. "It's a pity I wasn't there when it happened. I just happened to know the cure that could have saved her." Dumbledore lowered his head slightly at Lockhart's words, a puzzled expression on his face. Professor McGonagall and Snape also had peculiar expressions, the former's eyes held a hint of resignation, the latter's amusement, as if watching a clown's performance. Locke wasn't surprised by this. In fact, Dumbledore had already informed some close professors about Professor Lockhart's background, and Locke had received some hints. Since he was inviting him to teach at the academy, Dumbledore naturally had to investigate. With the resources at his disposal, uncovering Lockhart's background wouldn't be difficult. Although Professor Lockhart had been a brilliant graduate of Ravenclaw, he had since devoted all his energy to the pursuit of fame and fortune, neglecting to improve his skills. Gradually, aside from the frequently used amnesia charm, he had relinquished almost all other spells to the academy, becoming a mere half-witted wizard. Dumbledore had no intention of paying attention to Lockhart. He checked on Mrs. Norris, thought for a moment, and said to Locke, "Mr. Locke, could you please take her to the infirmary and inform Professor Sprout?" Locke knew this was a deliberate attempt to distract him, and he presumably wanted to see how things went before deciding whether to inform her, as they hadn't yet established sufficient trust. Knowing the plot, he didn't care. He stepped past Lockhart and attempted to remove Mrs. Norris from the candlestick. "Be careful," Professor Lockhart said bluntly, assuming Locke was just an ordinary library keeper. "Don't break it." He rolled his eyes. If there weren't so many people watching, Locke would have taught him a lesson. Now he could only look at him expressionlessly. With a thud, Mrs. Norris slowly floated down into Locke's hands. Locke's demonstration of silent and wandless magic left Professor Lockhart still unaware. He glanced bewilderedly at the professors around him, unsure who was casting the spell. Seeing his look, Locke felt that this guy was a fool, because it was quite boring for him to be unhappy, but he was jumping around like this in front of him, and he would definitely be beaten to death if he had the chance. Now Locke was too lazy to pay attention to him anymore, and turned to Dumbledore and said, "Mr. Headmaster, I have some mandrakes in my shop. Do you need me to bring them over?" "Indeed, the existing mandrakes are not yet mature. It would be a great help if you have some," Dumbledore said. "With this thing, we can save Mrs. Norris." Before Locke walked away, Professor Lockhart suddenly shouted, "It's the mandrake. I knew it a long time ago. I just gave my mandrake to one of my book fans last week. Let her remove the petrification curse on her family." Dumbledore and several professors were getting more and more impatient with his performance. At this time, they had no intention of responding, but turned to look at Harry Potter as if they didn't hear it at all and asked, "Harry, can you tell me what happened?" Honestly, when Locke first read this story, he had no idea what Harrybert was thinking. Given the circumstances, he'd concealed the truth and fabricated a bunch of lies to justify his actions. In reality, Dumbledore could have known the truth with a simple mind-draining spell. He probably didn't expose the truth because he was secretly observing the situation and hoping to seize another opportunity to eliminate one of Voldemort's spirits. Instead, Hermione returned to Locke's office and sat at her desk, chattering as she explained everything she knew. As he listened, Locke brought out a glass of milk, slightly warming it with magic. Hermione frowned slightly as she took the milk. She didn't really like warm milk, but since Locke was offering it, she took it anyway, intending to sip it slowly so she wouldn't have to drink too much before leaving. "Don't worry, this is a special milk, it doesn't have that fishy smell of regular milk." Locke, having spent so much time with Hermione and knowing some of her habits, smiled and explained. After hearing this, Hermione tentatively licked it with her tongue. The slightly sweet and silky feeling, without the unpleasant smell of ordinary milk, made Hermione's eyes light up. She squinted her eyes, happily held the cup and drank slowly. Chapter 208 The Two People's Plan. About 2 weeks later, on the second night of the Quidditch match, the second victim appeared. Locke was practicing spells in the room of requirement when he received the news. Dumbledore had sent a messenger to inform him to go to the infirmary. Upon arriving, he saw Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall sitting in front of a bed, talking. When Locke arrived, Dumbledore didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, "Do you have any mature mandrakes?" Professor McGonagall explained, "As you can see, Colin Creevey and Mrs. Norris were petrified. Indeed, we do have some. Mandrakes have relatively few uses and are somewhat dangerous, so few people cultivate or collect them. But ever since I saw Mrs. Norris being attacked, I've arranged for someone to buy some for backup. I figured it wouldn't hurt to have some on hand." "Your idea is excellent," Dumbledore nodded. "That reminds me I should definitely stock up. However, the prices of all kinds of magical items and materials have risen dramatically recently, and finding them is even harder." This was actually Locke's influence. With his constant acquisition of magical materials and items, even many magical materials that were once in plentiful supply have become scarce, driving up their prices. If all this material were piled up in the dimensional space, Locke's limited space would have been completely filled by now. Thanks to the magical traceless extension spell, Locke was able to sort the materials into boxes that were cast with a permanent traceless extension spell. The boxes, labeled with the names of various materials, filled most of the wall in the dimensional space. "It's great that you still have mandrakes on hand." Professor McGonagall was also very happy. "The mandrakes in the college will not mature until the end of the semester. We can't just watch the children suffer like this until the end of the semester, but the key is what to do next." Locke looked at Dumbledore at this time. "The number of victims will surely increase. I don't have enough mandrakes on hand now." After hearing this, Dumbledore looked at Harry, who was hospitalized in another bed due to an injury in the Quidditch match, and raised his voice a little. "It seems that we can't hide it anymore. Inform all employees that the college is no longer safe, and the Chamber of Secrets has been opened again." After saying this, Dumbledore called Locke to the principal's office and said, "What do you think about this incident? I've also been paying attention to the situation in the college recently. Even though the weather outside is cold now, the spiders in the castle are flying out, and the roosters raised by Mr. Hagrid have also been killed. These situations remind me of the basilisk." "Basilisk?" No wonder, Dumbledore, being in the thick of things, naturally wasn't as quick on script as Locke. Reminded of this, he immediately connected the dots. "Mr. Locke, you've been a great help to me. I need to make some preparations." Dumbledore then gave Locke a few more words before leaving the academy through the fireplace in the headmaster's office. Locke didn't see Dumbledore again until 2 days later, when Dumbledore summoned Locke to the headmaster's office again. This time, Locke noticed that the phoenix, named Fawkes, looked languid, as if he were extremely weak. "Fawkes is nearing his rebirth, but I have to call on him for help," Dumbledore said. "And I need your help, too," Locke nodded. This was his plan. To be honest, he was also interested in Fawkes. While the dragons and phoenixes in the Harry Potter world weren't nearly as powerful as the legendary mythical creatures, they were still at the pinnacle of magical power. Locke had secretly acquired some dragon eggs, which he could easily cultivate upon his return. But as far as he knew, Fawkes was the only phoenix in the wizarding world. Dumbledore, having confirmed Locke's size, had identified him as Voldemort. He had been preparing for the past few days, essentially planning a fishing expedition for the Dark Lord. Knowing the basilisk was responsible, Dumbledore used his masterful telepathy to easily locate the Horcrux notebook in Ginny Weasley's possession. He also confirmed a connection to the Malfoy family, one of the college's directors. The basilisk's presence at the college was due to Lucius Malfoy secretly inserting the notebook, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, into the hands of Ron's sister, Ginny Weasley, before the start of the school year. Voldemort's remnant possessed Ginny, opening the Chamber of Secrets and releasing the basilisk. Dumbledore had this time targeted the Malfoy family, who had been causing him trouble. Lucius Malfoy was a Death Eater. While not a die-hard Voldemort loyalist, following Voldemort solely for profit, he possessed the highest wealth, prestige, and influence among the Death Eaters. In other words, after Voldemort's return, he would be able to provide the greatest assistance to Voldemort, so suppressing him was essential. By exploiting this year's crisis at the Academy, Dumbledore could gain leverage over Lucius Malfoy and force him to relinquish his seat on the board. If Lucius Malfoy didn't show up, Dumbledore would reveal his identity as a Death Eater. Many wizards in the magical world have had their relatives harmed by Death Eaters, and many seek revenge. Furthermore, the Malfoy family's wealth, accumulated over generations, combined with their inherent strength and long-standing connections, could become enemies if they were known to be Death Eaters. The Malfoy family would then become a target, and even if the Ministry of Magic didn't eliminate them completely, they would decline or even perish under the relentless attacks. Therefore, if Dumbledore had leverage over Lucius Malfoy, he would undoubtedly be forced to relinquish his seat on the board, in accordance with Dumbledore's wishes. Dumbledore also hinted to Locke that if successful, Locke would have the opportunity to fulfill his previous wish and replace the Malfoy family as a trustee of the school, essentially a trade-off for Locke's benefit. Locke readily agreed to this plan and offered his assistance. The position of Hogwarts trustee would provide numerous advantages and facilitate his actions within the wizarding world. Furthermore, who could have said that Lucius's relinquishment of the trusteeship meant Locke would need to conceal it? He only needed to quietly spread rumors. While the effects might not be immediate, they could slowly undermine the Malfoy family's foundations, giving Locke the opportunity to gradually erode the Malfoys' assets and influence within the wizarding world. Dumbledore briefly outlined his plans, and Locke quickly joined in. Thus, while Dumbledore could now handle the basilisk, he continued to let it go, even concealing the plan from the professors. With no one in the dark, Lucius Malfoy was unaware of anything amiss and, naturally, unable to prepare to disengage himself from the situation. Chapter 209 Hermione's Duel. To defraud Lucius, Dumbledore feigned ignorance, causing panic among Hogwarts. Everyone began seeking various methods to protect themselves, while others seized the opportunity to assert themselves. Professor Lockhart, for example, organized a dueling club, promoting it as a way to improve students' spellcasting skills and, in the event of an encounter with a creature of the Chamber of Secrets, increase their chances of survival. It's undeniable that Lockhart had forgotten most of his wizarding knowledge over the years, but his skill in deceiving others with his propaganda had only grown. Thanks to Lockhart's propaganda, the dueling club quickly became popular, attracting scores of students, especially young half-bloods, who were rumored to be the only ones attacked by the creature of the Chamber of Secrets. Even Hermione had friends trying to get her to join. Locke had already learned from her that Professor Lockhart was a half-witted wizard and the club was a farce, so she wasn't impressed. However, Locke hadn't anticipated how both he and Hermione would be drawn into it because of Snape. One day, Locke and Hermione were passing by the club's practice room when they happened to meet Snape. Locke casually greeted her, while Hermione politely saluted. Seeing Locke, Snape seemed to have a thought and said, "Come with me." Without waiting for Locke's reply, Snape pushed open the practice room door. Locke frowned, thinking, no wonder Snape is so unpopular. The protagonist treats him as a villain. How could he give such a blunt command? Locke wasn't his student. Seeing Snape open the door and walk in, Locke hesitated before joining Hermione in the classroom. Many of the students knew Hermione. After all, she had been the top student in her grade since she started. Locke, on the other hand, was a relative stranger. Only a few knew that Locke was the teacher Hermione often mentioned, and they were whispering about him with those around them. Using his keen hearing, Locke observed the students' conversation and realized that most of them were there just to join in the fun. Because the entire college was under martial law, and except for classes, all important matters had to be kept in the dormitories, many students took this opportunity to relax. Students who truly studied were quite discerning. Hogwarts changed its defense against the dark arts teacher almost every year, and many senior students could tell the true quality of the teaching. Therefore, Professor Lockhart's propaganda only managed to fool the younger students, who mostly dismissed his claims as having any real impact. It seems the public's eyes are sharp, Locke thought to himself. Then, Locke saw Professor Lockhart, clearly dressed in an exquisite shirt, vest, and a one-shoulder cape, approach the dueling stage in the center of the room and loudly call for all students to come closer to listen. At this point, Locke noticed that most of the senior students hadn't moved, some even discreetly stood at the back, leaving the front row for the younger students. Even after Professor Lockhart's subsequent remarks, none of the students paid much attention. Most of them had seen through Lockhart's claims and weren't particularly impressed. Listening to Lockhart's nonsense, Locke grew bored. Finally, a frown escaped his lips. He turned to Snape and said, "What on earth did you call me here for? If it's for me to see this, I think my time is very valuable." "Hermione might need to come in for a bit," Snape suddenly said. With a slight frown, Locke glanced at the slightly surprised Hermione before looking back at Snape. "What did that fellow do to you that you intend to make such a fool of himself? Don't you want to see him in such a state?" Snape didn't answer, merely asking. Then, as if to reassure Locke, he added, "Don't worry. I know Hermione's abilities. She'll be fine." Of course, Hermione wouldn't have any problems. With Locke's help, Hermione was now much stronger than in the story. Her knowledge rivaled that of some senior students. As for combat skills, with Locke constantly feeding her moves, she was extremely proficient in many practical combat spells. Under these circumstances, she had no problem dealing with Lockhart, who had degenerated into a half-baked character. Despite this, Locke still wanted to inquire about the person's willingness. He looked at Hermione and asked, "What do you think? Are you willing to go on stage? When I mentioned you earlier, Professor Lockhart was very disrespectful. He said you were just a library keeper and had no right to be compared with a full professor." At this, Hermione's face showed indignation. "In that case, let me teach him a lesson. After all, many people can see by now that he's not much better than a muggle." "Very good." Hearing Hermione's answer, Snape nodded in satisfaction. At this time, Lockhart was talking about giving everyone a demonstration and introduced Snape as his assistant, saying that Snape would help him show everyone how to use the Expelliarmus charm more effectively. Noticing Lockhart's words, Locke finally understood why, given Snape's personality, he couldn't help but want to teach him a lesson. Hermione Granger. Since Hermione had agreed, Snape took advantage of this moment to suddenly call out Hermione's name and motion for her to come on stage. Lockhart hadn't expected Snape to be so upset by him. Without giving him any face, he directly called Hermione on stage to demonstrate a duel with him, which caught him off guard. I thought Hermione was actually there when the Chamber of Secrets was opened, and she also wanted to practice her actual combat skills. "I will be the referee," Snape said loudly, not waiting for Lockhart to react. Hermione was actually quite famous in her grade. Many people knew her. Lockhart's opponent had suddenly become a young wizard. Having fooled him for years, he naturally wasn't panicking. He confidently addressed the students. "Of course, don't worry, everyone. I promise Hermione will be safe. I'll be careful with my actions." Snape, fed up with Lockhart's pretense, interrupted. "Get ready. Stand up." Snape gestured to the two men to get ready. Professor Lockhart was forced to stop speaking and stand across from Hermione on the stage. Following the dueling procedure, the two men drew their wands and held them upright before them in salute. Then, they simultaneously turned, each taking 5 steps forward, then turned back again, ready to duel. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, A Real Slap in the Face. Lockhart, never forgetting his appearance, placed one hand on his waist, his wand raised in front of him, pointing diagonally upward. This was clearly an amateurish move, serving no purpose other than to look cool. Hermione, on the other hand, performed a standard spellcasting motion, without any extraneous flourishes. Seeing that they were ready, Snape said, "All right, I'll count 1, 2, 3, and you can cast your spell." 1, 2, 3, Expelliarmus. A typical wizard spell required not only the incantation but also a standard wand-waving motion. Hermione's reaction was swift. The moment Snape counted to 3, she thrust her wand forward and recited the spell quickly and clearly. The next moment, a burst of magic erupted, and Lockhart had barely begun to speak when Hermione's magic struck him. Hermione, a bit cunning, aimed her wand not at Lockhart's chest, but at his wand itself. And if your weapon doesn't hit the target, it can also repel or even knock the enemy away. As for the effect, it depends on how much magic power the caster exerts. After being hit, Lockhart couldn't help but scream, and then flew backwards, flying several meters before landing on his butt again. Yet, a very standard pink Sheldon style, Locke nodded, and gave Hermione a thumbs up in his heart. It was obvious that this was done on purpose by Hermione. Being hit suddenly, Lockhart was a little confused. He was obviously just a young wizard in the lower grade. How could he cast spells so quickly? And his appearance made the students around him couldn't help laughing. I don't know who started it first. The next moment all the students burst into laughter, and there was a joyful atmosphere around. At this time, Lockhart regained his senses, quickly stood up, and shouted, "All right, everyone, be quiet." No matter what, the students always had to give Lockhart, as their teacher, some face. The laughter finally stopped gradually. Lockhart was indeed a smart man and quickly found an excuse. "Everyone, please pay attention. The reason I didn't react just now was because Miss Granger cast the spell incorrectly. She didn't hit my wand. Obviously, she was trying to save time, so she made a mistake when casting the spell. The spell attacked my body, not my wand. Because of this, I didn't block it." Lockhart's explanation seemed reasonable and well-founded, and it made some people believe that he was just careless. But Snape would not let him get away with it so easily. At this time, he took the opportunity to say, "You are right. Since the demonstration just now was wrong, let's do it again. This time, Miss Granger, please pay attention and make sure to aim your weapon at your opponent." Snape emphasized the word weapon. Similarly, some students who hadn't bought Lockhart's excuses joined in the clamor, saying, "Yes, we want to see a proper demonstration." This situation put Lockhart in a difficult position, and his forced smile faltered. Then, as if struck by a thought, his eyes rolled, and he said calmly, "No problem. Miss Granger's movements are actually quite easy to see through. I was just caught off guard." "Very good, then, please prepare again," Snape said loudly, his expression unchanged. When the two of them had once again stood still, Lockhart looked at Hermione and said, "Miss Granger, please pay attention to the key points. Aim at your opponent's wand. Don't make the same mistake again." Hermione ignored him and continued with the same movements as before. This time, Lockhart was much more cautious, performing the movements with proper accuracy. Snape also began to count. 1, 2, Expelliarmus, 3. Snape had barely finished counting 2, barely opened his mouth when Lockhart suddenly stepped forward, waving his wand and unleashing a spell, also aimed at Hermione. It was actually a premature foul, but the difference in time was only a fraction of a second, making it easy to confuse. Apparently, Lockhart, noticing Hermione's proficiency in spells, had chosen to steal the fight. Snape, the referee, couldn't help but frown, surprised by Lockhart's disrespect. Actually, after what had just happened, Lockhart had lost all his dignity. This kind of sneak attack would have been a natural fall for any wizard, but Hermione was different. In their simulated battles, Lockhart had been using real-world tactics, even employing occasional sneak attacks himself. This had taught Hermione to observe her opponent's subtle movements. Hermione had long noticed something was wrong in Lockhart's eyes, and she was prepared for it. She immediately moved the wand in front of her and blocked Lockhart's sudden attack with a wand. But because he was hit by magic, the wand in his hand came out of his hand. Seeing that Lockhart, as a professor, had a shameless malicious foul, a hint of anger flashed across Hermione's face, and she actually performed well. The rodless spell that she had only been stumbling before was successfully cast. Hermione first quickly recited the spell, pulled the wand back from midair and held it again, and then pointed the wand at Lockhart, who was surprised, and directly shot another weapon to remove you, and directly aimed it at Professor Lockhart's face. What a slap in the face! Bang! Lockhart seemed to be slapped in the face out of thin air, and flew back again, even his scream was pressed into his throat because of the hit. Hang! Before Lockhart could even land, Hermione swung her wand again, and another spell struck him, sending him suddenly soaring into the air, where he spun like a pinwheel. Still not satisfied, Hermione cast Expelliarmus several times, smacking him across the face. Finally, relieved, she put her wand away. A moment later, the hanging effect faded, and Lockhart tumbled onto the stage, unable to even get up. Glancing at the utterly bewildered Lockhart, Locke knew this matter could be serious or minor. If Lockhart was petty and insisted on pursuing the matter, accusing Hermione of maliciously teasing the professor, Hermione, a mere student, would surely be punished. "Sorry, I have something else to do here, and I need to take Hermione away," Locke said. He glanced at Snape, whose lip curled, and rolled his eyes at him. He then went up to the stage, grabbed Hermione, and prepared to take her to Dumbledore to speak with her. Before Locke and Hermione left the room, they heard a sudden burst of laughter behind them. Locke took Hermione's hand and said to her, "You performed the wandless spell of the spell just now very well. With more practice, you should be able to cast wandless spells with ease." Seeing that Locke didn't seem to have any intention of blaming her, Hermione, who had been a little scared, immediately relaxed. A happy smile appeared on her face, and she said happily, "I will, teacher." Chapter 211 Being Targeted. The original plot was altered due to Snape's sudden inspiration, allowing Hermione to intervene. However, Locke hadn't anticipated that after his departure, Professor Lockhart, too embarrassed to remain, would continue the demonstration. He arranged for Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy to compete, revealing Harry's Parseltongue ability. This incident caused everyone to distance themselves from Harry. It's no wonder they were wary. Numerous signs pointed to Harry's involvement in recent events, especially with the reappearance of another victim a few days later, plunging Harry into a whirlpool of public opinion. Harry's situation also somewhat overshadowed Lockhart's. He had been keeping a low profile, remaining relatively quiet, and even seemed to be avoiding Hermione. Unknowingly, Christmas vacation arrived again. Unlike usual, when some students stayed behind, this time, fearing an attack, the students chose to leave the school, which had become unsafe. Due to these unrests, parents began to express their discontent, especially Lucius Malfoy, who was still fuming, accusing Dumbledore of negligence in multiple forums. Lucius Malfoy seemed determined to remove Dumbledore from his position as headmaster, and Dumbledore's public appearance seemed genuinely utterly irritated. While undercurrents swirled privately, everything remained largely as planned. A few days after the holiday break, Locke was walking down the school corridor, about to visit the headmaster's office to discuss the next steps with Dumbledore, when he suddenly paused. "I didn't expect I'd be targeted too." Long accustomed to constantly maintaining his magical senses, Locke instantly detected the basilisk around the corner ahead, accompanied by a subtle grinding sound. The basilisk, seemingly aiming to ambush him, remained almost motionless around the corner. If it weren't for Locke's acute senses, he wouldn't have been able to detect the subtle breathing and grinding sound. Illusion. Locke cast a spell, and a figure resembling him suddenly appeared beside him. This magical form even had a certain texture, making it more than a mere illusion, but its qualities were mediocre and easily dismantled. He slowly controlled the illusion, slowly approaching the corner of the corridor, when suddenly the basilisk charged out, its massive body crashing directly into it. Puff! The immense force instantly shattered the illusion. Before the basilisk could comprehend what had happened, Locke's attack had already arrived. God's Edge, Shadowless. This spell looked simple, but it was actually quite powerful. Locke cast it, instantly flying several meters across, successfully striking the basilisk's massive head. Hiss! The basilisk let out a painful whine, then seemed enraged. Clearly, its naturally tough skin gave it immense protection, and while the God's Edge, Shadowless, had hurt, it hadn't caused any serious damage. The enraged basilisk spotted Locke and suddenly increased its speed. With a grinding sound, it opened its massive jaws and bit towards Locke. Watching the basilisk's movements, Locke remained remarkably calm. Using his gun and martial arts calculations, he instantly devised a suitable countermeasure. With a sudden, powerful leap, he spun in midair. With a flick of his hand, a heavy metal sword appeared in his grasp. The basilisk missed, and Locke dove, stabbing the greatsword directly at the monster's eyeball. To Locke's surprise, he felt no sharp penetration. Instead a soft, supple touch. This told him his strike hadn't done the damage he'd hoped. Frowning, Locke hadn't anticipated the basilisk's strength. Knowing its strong resistance to magic, he'd considered physical countermeasures, but surprisingly, its physical defenses were also quite formidable. The previous blow, striking the basilisk's eyelid, had only caused it pain. Amidst a rapidly changing battle, Locke's mind raced, constantly pondering a countermeasure. Stung by the eyelid, the basilisk instantly lifted its head in response, charging towards Locke in midair. Fortunately, thanks to his experience in gunfire and martial arts, Locke had anticipated the basilisk's reaction. He twisted his body slightly, allowing the basilisk's head to strike his feet. Using the momentum, He leaped diagonally backward over 10 meters, to the position of the basilisk's tail. Steadying himself on the ground, Locke watched the basilisk thrashing in agony as his eyeballs thrashed, pondering a response. Of course, he couldn't use powerful modern weapons at Hogwarts. If he caused a disturbance and destroyed the school, even if he could recover, he would be in for a rough time. Therefore, he had to resort to appropriate magic. The basilisk's resistance to magic was immense. Locke's previous attack, with its divine edge and shadowless blade, could have cut through even iron plates, but it hadn't yet pierced the basilisk's hide. This meant that Locke's options were limited. Barring the use of advanced magic like the divine fire charm, Locke would have to resort to physical means to combat it. Locke was about to cast a spell, thinking this, when he heard footsteps nearby. Remembering his agreement with Dumbledore not to overexpose his strength, Locke's incantation became, "Be careful. Don't come near." Then, recalling the basilisk's characteristics from the storyline, Locke cast an onomatopoeic spell. A resounding rooster's crow echoed through the long corridor. At the sound, the basilisk's body suddenly contracted, its massive mouth gaping, its tongue hissing twice, something indistinct. Perhaps the crowing had its effect, or perhaps it sensed someone approaching. The basilisk suddenly turned and scurried around a corner. Locke followed cautiously, only to see its tail disappear into a pipe. What happened? Perhaps because of the commotion, professors, including Dumbledore and the four heads of house, arrived one after another and began to question Locke. "I'm fine. I was just attacked." Locke hesitated, looking at Dumbledore. Dumbledore understood Locke's intentions. He had been deliberately concealing the basilisk, and Locke was questioning whether he should tell the truth. It was the basilisk, Dumbledore thought for a moment, then decided to tell the truth. The basilisk. Snape was slightly stunned and didn't react immediately. After all, unlike Locke, he already knew the plot and naturally understood who was behind the basilisk. "This is not the place to talk. Let's go to my office and talk it over," Dumbledore said. "Do you want to send Locke to the infirmary first?" Professor McGonagall interjected. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine," Locke said. "Because I discovered it in advance, I was prepared, so I wasn't attacked." "All right." Professor McGonagall looked at Locke, whose clothes were not messed up, nodded, and stopped asking questions. "Well, then, everyone, come to my office and discuss this matter together," Dumbledore said at the right time. Chapter 212. It feels so good to become stronger. As they made their way to the headmaster's office, Locke pondered why the basilisk had targeted him. Could it be that Voldemort still harbored a grudge for his previous destruction of Voldemort's spirit? It seemed that Voldemort's Horcruxes couldn't share memories, and the story that had been publicized afterward was that Harry Potter had killed Voldemort, not his own involvement at all. Could it be that he had misremembered, and that Voldemort's Horcruxes, like shadow clones, could share memories after being destroyed? As his thoughts wandered, the group arrived at the office. Dumbledore said, "Let's first examine what Mr. Locke has just experienced." He then produced a pensieve and gestured to Locke. Locke used magic to extract a portion of his memories, channeling them into the pensieve, revealing them. The group stepped forward, chanting a spell, and quickly recounted Locke's experiences. The entire encounter had lasted only a minute or two. Besides their surprise that it was the basilisk that attacked them, they were also amazed by the fighting prowess Locke displayed during the battle. "Locke doesn't seem to be using much magic," Professor McGonagall couldn't help but remark. "It's practically a humanoid baby dragon, and it still needs magic." Snape couldn't help but grumble. "He looks more like a knight with special powers from those chivalric novels than a wizard." "Okay, let's get down to business," Dumbledore explained to the professors present. Since those present were his trusted advisors, he let them in on a few details. After Locke was attacked, the basilisk didn't reappear for a long time, as if the damage Locke had previously inflicted had frightened it. One day, Dumbledore suddenly approached Locke and said in a serious tone, "I'm planning to leave the academy temporarily." "Leave the academy now?" Locke was taken aback for a moment, then realized, "Are you trying to play hard to get?" "More or less," Dumbledore said. "There's been a lot of talk on the school board about impeaching me lately, and I'm just taking advantage of the situation. If I don't leave the academy, Tom might not dare to show up." Locke nodded, understanding Dumbledore's intentions, and then asked, "What can I do for you?" "Indeed, there's something I can do for you," Dumbledore nodded. "I've made some arrangements. Harry might choose to go to the Forbidden Forest to meet Aragog next, As soon as Dumbledore said this, Locke knew he was asking for him to be their babysitter, and he didn't refuse. He agreed without hesitation. Sure enough, the next day, someone from the Ministry of Magic arrived, and it was the current Minister of Magic, Cornelius Oswald Fudge. This time, they were going to announce Hagrid's removal. The reason was that Hagrid had been keeping a giant acromantula in the castle many years ago, and it happened to be around the same time that the monster of the Chamber of Secrets had attacked. Minister Fudge remained somewhat cautious in Dumbledore's presence, offering only flattery. If it weren't for his 4 subordinates, Locke would have mistaken him for just another ministry employee. As he passed by Locke, Dumbledore seemingly said to the minister, "Let's go take a look. I think it should be tonight." Seeing Locke's understanding nod, Dumbledore felt relieved. Shortly after Dumbledore and Minister Fudge left, Lucius Malfoy arrived at the academy with a swagger. He confronted Dumbledore and, with a condescending attitude, announced his dismissal from the headmastership, presenting a document from the Board of Trustees. Without paying any further attention to Dumbledore, Locke quietly followed Harry and Ron into the Forbidden Forest, watching as they followed the spider's trail to the heart of the acromantula's lair. Noticing the gathering of Acromantulas and Harry Potter and already engaged in a conversation with Aragog, Locke thought to himself that Harry Potter truly lived up to his role as the protagonist, always recklessly advancing, relying on his divinely gifted luck to instantly defeat any who dared. As expected, Harry and Aragog's conversation broke down. Aragog meaningfully stated that he would abide by his agreement with Hagrid and not deliberately hunt humans, but would not prevent his descendants from enjoying a free meal. Harry and Ron were furious at this remark, but failed to notice the playful amusement in Aragog's eyes. Aragog then uttered, "Goodbye, Hagrid's friends." As soon as he finished speaking, hundreds of acromantulas gathered around them, ready to attack Harry and Ron. But the dense swarm of acromantulas, which could inflict trypophobia, was enough to inflict trypophobia. They crawled or leaped from the trees, surrounding Harry and Ron and slowly approaching. What audacious couple! Locke suddenly appeared, and Harry and Ron realized they had suddenly been surrounded by someone. "Oh my God, Mr. Locke, help!" Ron, recognizing Locke, cried out, his terror evident to anyone with a discerning eye. "Vulcan protection!" Locke, without hesitation, extended his hand and pointed. A pillar of fire suddenly rose, forming a circular wall of flames around them, trapping himself and Harry in the center. He then pointed upward, somewhat preventing the attack from above. After long hours of practice, Locke had mastered a divine fire charm. Compared to the grim fire charm, the divine fire charm was more controllable and possessed unparalleled power. Just look at the fate of the acromantulas. Initially, the acromantulas thought it was just ordinary magical fire and had no intention of stopping. With their naturally strong magic resistance, ordinary flames would only cause them minor injuries. However, the outcome was not what they had expected. The first few acromantulas, upon contact with the flames, their massive bodies were reduced to ash. Perhaps this description was inaccurate. In reality, their bodies vanished the moment they came into contact with the flames, without even burning. Looking at these acromantulas, Locke couldn't help but think of the small town where he'd first met Ashley. Those giant spiders might have been similar in size to the acromantulas before him, but in reality, their speed, reflexes, and strength were far inferior. After all, they weren't magical creatures. Back then, he'd needed to rely on advantageous terrain and others to defend himself against the giant spiders. But now, facing the even more powerful acromantulas, he had no need to worry, easily handling them. This made Locke feel that he'd grown much stronger. It really feels good to be stronger, Locke thought to himself. The leading wave of acromantulas couldn't help but charge towards the wall of fire, then vanished one by one as if they'd stepped into a portal in space and time. Just as one acromantula was about to collide with the wall of fire, it was struck by a giant spider in the air. It stopped just as its 2 front legs touched the wall of fire. But in that instant of contact, 2 of its front legs were shattered. The acromantula's underdeveloped brain was a bit confused, but it instinctively sensed danger and stopped charging. With this example, the acromantulas finally understood that their companions hadn't passed through the flames, but had been instantly reduced to ash. It then began to warn its surrounding companions, but due to the chaos, many acromantulas continued to burn to ashes. They finally stopped, hesitating around the flames, unsure what to do. Chapter 213 Waiting for the opening. Now out of danger, Harry and Ron felt relieved and began to ask, "Mr. Locke, why are you here?" I heard about you from Hermione and guessed you'd come to the Forbidden Forest. I was worried you might be in danger, so I followed you to check on you," Locke replied casually. "My concerns were indeed correct. If I hadn't come, you'd probably be dead. I don't know whether to call you brave or ignorant." Feeling elated, Locke didn't bother to lecture Harry and Ron. He simply wanted to go back and have a good chat with Hermione, telling her to be more cautious in the future. Thinking of the Acromantulas swarming around them, Harry and Ron shuddered, feeling a sense of dread. But then Harry added, "I know this is the Forbidden Forest, but we have reasons to be here." At this, Harry seemed to suddenly feel a strong sense of mission, his eyes firm. Locke smiled, thinking that the protagonists were indeed foolhardy and had a special sense of mission. Otherwise, they wouldn't cause so much trouble. This is how most plots work. Noticing the giant Acromantula gradually stop, hesitating around the flames instead of continuing to attack them, Locke simply said, "It's Headmaster Dumbledore's job to teach you a lesson when we get back. For now, you'd better leave quickly, but there are all those giant spiders outside." "How are we supposed to leave?" Ron said tremblingly. "Just go ahead. Divine fire, make a path." Locke chanted a spell and pointed the way out. A gap opened in the wall of fire surrounding the three of them, rapidly spreading outward, forming a flame-lined passage. Harry and Ron were stunned. They had never seen such a sharp magical effect before. It was truly magnificent and powerful. Only when Locke urged them again did they come to their senses and quickly leave along the flame-open passage. "Thank you, Mr. Locke," Harry said, then grabbed Ron and quickly left. Watching the two men run dozens of meters away and be picked up by one or two flying cars, Locke looked at the cars with a certain interest. That car was crafted by Mr. Weasley from an alchemical tree. Harry and Ron had used it to get to school when they missed their train at the beginning of the term. Later, the car remained in the Forbidden Forest, but for unknown reasons, it gradually developed a consciousness of its own. Fortunately, it seemed to be influenced by its creator and instinctively wanted to protect Ron. Mr. Weasley's alchemy skills were quite impressive. Perhaps I could learn more from him later. Watching the two people safely escape, Locke controlled the flames to shrink, surrounding him, and then looked out at the surrounding area, which was filled with Acromantulas. As the flames shrank, the Acromantulas assumed attacking stances, their huge claws crackling in a flurry. But because of their previous experience, none of the Acromantulas rushed forward. Instead, Aragog, the Acromantula leader, asked cautiously, "Who are you?" "I'm a representative from Hogwarts," Locke said. "I'm here to warn you. Behave yourself. The Forbidden Forest belongs to Hogwarts. Since you live here, you must abide by the rules. Or, do you intend to challenge them?" Locke waved his hand, and flames erupted and spread around him, instantly wiping out dozens of Acromantulas. Then, looking at the restless Acromantulas, Locke continued, "Remember, do not harm any students in the academy from now on, or you can see if I have the power to wipe out your entire brood." As he spoke, Locke's mind controlled a divine fire, and a flaming phoenix formed around him. This creature's form imbued the flame with a rudimentary consciousness, allowing it to distinguish friend from foe and attack automatically. While the divine fire might not be as destructive as fiend fire, it offered a significant advantage. Unlike fiend fire, it was often uncontrolled. It only shifted its state upon command, consciously burning those who lived. After a long hesitation, Aragog seemed willing to yield, but with a final shred of stubbornness, he said, "I can agree to your request, but you must give me a promise." "Tell me," Locke said calmly. "Don't let anyone from Hogwarts disturb us unless it's absolutely necessary. The Forbidden Forest is off limits to anyone," Locke said. "No one will disturb you unless it's absolutely necessary. Of course, if you encounter some unruly students, just scare them away, but don't let them get hurt, then it's a deal," Aragog said, as if to confirm it. Of course, Locke nodded affirmatively. Aragog waved his forelimbs and commanded the surrounding Acromantulas, "Make them leave." Locke retracted the phoenix formed from fire, but the flames still lingered around it. He glanced at the Acromantulas and calmly left. He wasn't worried about his own safety, but rather the battle at the end of Harry Potter, when the Acromantulas, werewolves, dementors, and tribal giants attacked Hogwarts. As expected, these magical creatures would retaliate at the first opportunity. With independent consciousness, they naturally sought freedom. It's no wonder the Ministry of Magic maintains such strict control over house elves. Once they awakened, rebellion was almost certain. House elves possessed a high degree of magical talent, And if they truly unleashed their powers, the devastation they could wreak could be far greater than the final battle. Therefore, even if Locke successfully brought some of the house elves back, he would need to carefully consider how to manage them. Leaving the Forbidden Forest, Locke returned to his bedroom to prepare. He had already left his mark on Harry during their earlier meeting. If nothing unexpected happened, he needed to be in top condition for Harry's rescue and Basilisk rescue tomorrow. Honestly, Locke wasn't particularly concerned about Harry's safety, and the protagonist wasn't likely to die easily. But since he was already collaborating with Dumbledore, he naturally had to fulfill his wishes. After making some preparations and resting well, Locke headed to the bathroom early the next morning after breakfast. Before entering, Locke cast a spell on himself to hide his figure, then found a suitable position, took out a book, and quietly waited while flipping through it. As for the ghost named Myrtle who was wandering around here, Locke took a casual look and lost interest. The main reason was that her appearance was really not good, and she was a little neurotic, so Locke didn't bother to pay attention to her. Chapter 214 Cutscene and School Director. After waiting in the bathroom for nearly an hour and a half, Locke suddenly heard Professor McGonagall's voice echoing through the castle. All students, return to your dormitories immediately. All teachers, please come to the second-floor corridor. Professor McGonagall used the magical broadcast, which sounded almost like a loudspeaker. Harry and the others should have appeared by now. Sure enough, before long, Locke saw Harry and Ron, wands in hand, forcing Professor Lockhart into the bathroom. Harry then questioned Myrtle about her death, and after some deduction, he found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Using Parseltongue to communicate the command, he unlocked the chamber's mechanism, revealing a deep, dark passage. Without waiting for Harry and the others to enter, Locke silently leaped through the tunnel entrance. Professor Lockhart, who was watching nearby, seemed to sense something was amiss and asked, "Did you make any noises?" "Don't change the subject. Get down there." Harry, no longer polite to Professor Lockhart, simply raised his hand and shoved him inside, leaving him stranded. A series of exclamations followed. Reaching the bottom of the tunnel, Harry surveyed his surroundings, noting numerous passages. The area was densely packed with passages, making it easy to get lost if one wasn't careful. There were also numerous animal bones on the ground, making a rattling sound with the slightest movement. Without hesitation, Locke cast a spell to silence the noise. Then, he heard faint screams from the direction they came from. He moved, and moments later, he saw Professor Lockhart exclaim as he landed with a thud, crushing many bones. Watching Lockhart struggle to his feet and push a portion of the bone out of the way, Locke noticed the muddy, foul ground beneath it. Frowning, he quickly cast another spell to block out the odor. Lockhart, having just stood up, surveyed his surroundings in amazement. Just as he was about to choose a passage to leave, Harry and Ron descended, their wands pointed at him before he could even rise. Lockhart could only raise his hands to signal his innocence. After surveying the surroundings, Harry finally chose a passage and instructed Ron, "From now on, if you hear anything, close your eyes immediately." Harry led the way, while Ron threatened Lockhart with his wand to follow. The three of them cleared the way, and Locke watched Harry twist and turn through the complex passageway. Soon, they came upon a 20-meter-long snake slough. At that moment, Lockhart suddenly collapsed. Ron approached to examine him and thought he had fainted from fright. He turned to Harry and said, "Our professor is quite courageous." Ron had barely finished his sarcasm when Lockhart suddenly leaped up, snatched Ron's wand, and pointed it at him. He said triumphantly to the now dare to move Ron, "Game over, kids." He glanced at the massive serpent slough again, his eyes rolling. "I think I have another great story on my hands. You two arrived too late to save the girl. Seeing the little girl's bloody corpse frightened you into amnesia. I rushed over just then, and although I didn't kill the basilisk, I succeeded in driving it away. From that perspective, I want to thank you for forcing me to come here. It's given me enough material for my next masterpiece." Lockhart looked at Harry and Ron triumphantly, his anticipation growing dangerous. "Well, then, famous Mr. Potter. It's you who will say goodbye to your memories." Lockhart swung a spell, unleashing his masterful Obliviate spell. The next moment, his wand snapped in two, the spell's backlash from the failed spell causing it to explode with a bang. The immense force sent Lockhart flying, crashing into the roof of the passageway, where he effectively lost consciousness. Ron, already using an old wand that had been broken in two by an accident, used it to cast his spell, only to have the spell backfire. This unexpected twist in the original novel was quite humorous. As for what would happen to Lockhart after he lost his memory, Lockhart remained unconcerned, aware that his success was the product of more than one obliviate victim. Following this incident, the passageway suddenly began to collapse, very close to Harry. After a while, it calmed down, separating Harry and Ron. Harry gave Ron a few final words of advice and continued on his way, intent on meeting the enemy alone. Locke followed, watching Harry activate the traps and eventually arrive at a vast space. A stone path paved with stone, flanked by streams of water, ended at a stone wall carved with a head, where Ginny lay. Everything followed much as in the storyline. A fragment of Voldemort's youth finally appeared, followed by a series of explanations about how the villain's death stemmed from his talkativeness. Harry then asserted his stance, while Locke watched as Fawkes the Phoenix appeared and easily blinded the basilisk. Of course, even with its eyes blinded, the basilisk didn't simply let loose as in the storyline. Instead, Locke intervened, directly restraining the basilisk, allowing Harry to slay it with a sort of Gryffindor. The entire process appeared similar to the storyline, but in reality, Harry would have been in grave danger had Locke not intervened. In real life, it's very rare for a villain to make a mistake or let the enemy win by allowing the protagonist to win. Locke's intervention wasn't particularly tedious. Early on, he simply entangled the basilisk, and then watched Harry and Voldemort engage in a love-hate relationship. Harry still received the honor of destroying Voldemort, but Locke also reaped significant benefits. Following the incident, Dumbledore reinstated him as headmaster, and Lucius Malfoy was forced to relinquish his position as Hogwarts trustee under Dumbledore's threat. Ultimately, Locke, with Dumbledore's support, became trustee. This was a tacit understanding between the two, especially after learning from Fawkes the Phoenix that Locke had expertly used the Divine Fire charm against the basilisk, which made Dumbledore unlikely to break his promise. Even if he wanted to secure the promised spoils, he needed to ensure he had sufficient strength to do so. Trusteeship was more than just a representative position, it also represented social status within the wizarding world. This position greatly facilitated Locke's subsequent activities within the Harry Potter world. Leveraging this position, Locke could better establish connections within the wizarding world, eliminating the constant need for Dumbledore's influence. Chapter 215 Night Tour. After the events of the Chamber of Secrets, Locke returned his focus to his magical practice. Recently, he's been studying the technique of telepathy. Learning this spell involves receiving the thoughts of others, essentially reading their minds. However, mastering it and avoiding its influence is not so easy. Without sufficient proficiency, once the spell is activated, all surrounding thoughts surge into the caster's mind. The sheer volume of these thoughts can easily cause confusion or even drive the caster insane. Only through rigorous training can one selectively listen to the target's thoughts while automatically blocking out all others. Therefore, the use of the spell requires the cooperation of others. Upon learning of this, Hermione offered to serve as a training partner, but Locke declined, citing her upcoming exams as a busy schedule. Hermione had enrolled in 12 courses, 7 required and 5 electives, with 12 exams to take. Not only did she have to prepare, but even the exams themselves took 4 full days. After the exams, the results were announced. To Locke's surprise, Hermione received all A's. This surprised her slightly. Hermione had a natural aptitude for academics and was willing to work hard, but Locke knew her strength. Getting the best in most courses wasn't surprising, but in divination, for example, Hermione could only pass. Locke congratulated Hermione, but his thoughts raced, and he finally glanced at Dumbledore, who was giving his final speech. As if noticing Locke's gaze, Dumbledore glanced at the report card in Locke's hand and Hermione beside him, giving a subtle nod. Locke understood that Hermione had somehow gotten a leg up. With a slight smile, Locke didn't address the jubilant Hermione, but simply praised her and urged her to keep working hard. Harry and Ron, having received the House Special Contribution Award for their basilisk slaying, had become the center of attention. They tried to maintain a calm demeanor, essentially playing it cool in the crowd. Harry's experience during the just concluded semester was full of ups and downs. Now that his hardships had finally paid off, he naturally wanted to savor his moment of glory. During the holidays, Locke and Hermione became his subjects for practicing mind snatching. Practicing this spell required a relatively closed environment to avoid receiving too much information during their first use. However, practicing alone was not possible, as doing so would prevent him from blocking out other thoughts and only capturing the target's voice. In addition to Hermione, he also had his two house elves join in, even playing recorded conversations to distract him. While this would be a difficult process for an ordinary person, for Locke, possessing an exceptionally high IQ, it only took a little getting used to. It was like Sheldon had 6 personalities, and even when he had nothing else to do, his inner personalities would hold meetings and argue. Therefore, the sheer volume of information was relatively manageable for Locke, and not overwhelming. Distinguishing the acquired mind's voice from external sounds, even voices, and selecting the information he needed to receive, required extensive practice. The process took Locke more than a day. Upon hearing about it, Dumbledore, a master of telepathy, was almost incredulous. "Teacher, have you heard of a time turner?" Hermione said to Locke near the start of school. "Every time the timer dials rotate, you can go back an hour in time. You can use it to do anything except change history. If you use such a magical thing for studying, you can gain a lot of extra time and learn more. I'd like to apply for one so I don't have to worry about running out of time for my studies. I think we should be cautious about this," Locke said. "Have you heard the saying? Those who play with time will eventually be played with by time." It's impossible to say Locke isn't interested in a time turner. He even owns one, but he's never used it. Anything related to time is too dangerous. Without sufficient power, Locke doesn't intend to touch it. There are countless examples of misfortunes caused by playing with time. Hermione was a bit unconvinced by Locke's words. She felt that so many people had used it without issue. However, due to Locke's stern prohibition, she agreed not to try the time turner again. The new school year began, as usual, with the events of Harry Potter, the protagonist. Sirius Black escaped from prison, prompting the Ministry of Magic to send Dementors to hunt him down. One of the Dementors, while searching the school bus, attacked Harry, leaving him unconscious for a long time and becoming a source of gossip. However, this incident did not derail the annual sorting ceremony. After the sorting, Dumbledore delivered his customary speech and then introduced 2 new professors. The new professor of defense against the dark arts was also an old acquaintance of Locke's, the werewolf Lupin. Hagrid was also assigned to care of magical creatures. After the Chamber of Secrets incident, Lucius was expelled from the school board, and Dumbledore's influence over the school increased significantly. This was why he was able to appoint Lupin and Hagrid as professors at Hogwarts, a move Locke even played a role in behind the scenes. Due to the aftermath of Lockhart's incident, many students were skeptical of Lupin's true abilities and remained cautious. However, their attention was quickly drawn to Dumbledore's final announcement. It focused on the Ministry of Magic's placement of the Dementors from Azkaban within the school until Sirius Black was captured. He also reassured the students, stating that the Ministry had guaranteed that the Dementors would not interfere with their lives. Of course, a final warning was also given, urging students not to approach the Dementors, casting a pall over many students as they began the new semester. After the opening ceremony, Hermione approached Locke and asked, "Teacher, can you give me a key to the library?" "No problem," Locke said, taking out a key and placing it in Hermione's hand. He then instructed, "I'm not telling you not to read books in the restricted section, but your foundation isn't particularly solid yet, so don't try to learn anything too complex or dangerous. It's best to tell me ahead of time what you want to read so I can check it for you. Also, I've set up counter spells and protective circles in the library. If you're caught wandering around at night, just say you came to see me." "I wouldn't wander around at night," Hermione retorted, blushing, but her tone was low, making her words unconvincing. It was obvious that Locke knew Hermione well and knew she had definitely done this before. Despite this, Hermione carefully put the key away. Chapter 216, Finding Some Fun. 2 years had passed since Locke arrived in the Harry Potter world. While it might seem that Locke hadn't significantly interfered with or altered the plot, his actions beyond the plot were considerable. Ever since he'd learned of his arrival in this world, he'd been planning to pack up his belongings and collect as many magical items and creatures as possible. This plan was steadily progressing. With his energy focused on these matters and improving his own abilities, Locke naturally had less motivation to interfere with the plot. He simply meddled in every incident to get his bearings. Over time, Locke's abilities and skills had steadily improved. He had already collected nearly all the relatively common magical items, and most of the remaining items were more difficult to obtain. This required Locke to possess considerable power and status within the magical community, a fact that his newly acquired position as a school trustee provided him with considerable advantages. During his vacation, Locke experimented with capturing divine thoughts among a group of 3 or 5 people. Once school started, he began to practice this spell at Hogwarts. Early that morning, just after sunrise, after getting ready, Locke cast a spell, attempting to navigate the school in this state. Kill him, I must kill him, no, I need to be patient. But just as he entered the Great Hall, he heard this intense inner voice, overwhelming all others. Frowning slightly, Locke glanced around, but couldn't spot anyone suspicious. He was almost certain it was Sirius Black. Locke's telepathic reading wasn't yet proficient enough to accurately locate the source of the voice, but the thought still concerned him. That afternoon, Locke hid outside the common room and activated his telepathic reading. About half an hour later, he heard Sirius Black's inner voice again. Focusing his attention, he watched the hallway until he saw a large black dog emerge. It scurried to the dormitory entrance and stood before the fat lady's portrait, transforming back into human form. It was none other than the bedraggled and disheveled Sirius Black. "Who are you?" the fat lady in the portrait gasped in shock. "It's me, Mom." Sirius forced a smile. "I'm Sirius Black. May I enter the dormitory?" "The password is strawberry, melon, pepper, peach, beef, orange, none of these," the fat lady said, fear in her tone, but she still said, "I won't let you in, please." Sirius said, "Please let me in. I won't hurt anyone, no, I'm going to tell the professors." Although afraid, the fat lady insisted on not letting Sirius through. This made Sirius lose his patience and raised his hands to grab the edge of the portrait, trying to pry it open. But Sirius's strength was obviously not enough to brute force the magical mechanism. He could only roar furiously, raging helplessly, and finally quickly transformed into the form of a black dog, ready to tear the portrait apart. Seeing this, Locke suddenly appeared, reached out and grabbed the back of Sirius Black's neck. Despite Sirius Black's desperate struggles, he still held on firmly and led him directly to the headmaster's office. Dumbledore, in his office, then saw Locke walking carrying a large dog. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "That's Sirius Black." Locke briefly explained how he'd practiced capturing the other person through telepathy, then looked at Sirius Black. As if realizing he couldn't escape, he transformed back into human form. "Well, let's talk, Black," Dumbledore said. "Headmaster, I didn't betray Potter and Lily." After a moment's hesitation, Sirius finally said this. "I believe you," Dumbledore said, "but I have no evidence, so I can't stop them from putting you in Azkaban." The two men exchanged a few words, and finally Black said, "I found Peter Pettigrew. He's still alive." "What?" Dumbledore was startled, then looked at Locke, thought for a moment, and recounted the incident. None of this was significantly different from the plot. Locke feigned reflection before saying, "Finding Peter Pettigrew shouldn't be difficult. I know the twins have a Marauder's map that should be able to pinpoint his location. I can bring it to you." "Marauder's map," Sirius sighed, seeming to sigh. "This map was created by the 4 of us back then. When you open it, the 4 code names that appear are Padfoot, Remus, Mooney, James, Prongs, and that damn Peter. That's Wormtail." Sirius's expression darkened as he spoke, his teeth gritting. Combining his memories with Sirius's recent explanation, Dumbledore understood everything. Seeing Sirius's reaction, he sighed inwardly. Dumbledore hadn't shown up, Locke had gone to him. Borrowing the Marauder's map wasn't difficult. Upon opening it, he discovered Peter Pettigrew was right there. "I was right, wasn't I? He's still alive. I found him." Sirius Black's expression was grim, his eyes filled with rage as he gazed at the map. "Ron, that Weasley, that rat, calm down," Dumbledore began to comfort Peter. Locke then said, "Since it's confirmed, let's focus on Ron first. Since Peter Pettigrew is still alive, Headmaster Dumbledore should be able to easily expose him, but I don't think this is perfect." "What do you think?" Dumbledore asked, then Locke shared his thoughts. "I must say, Mr. Locke, you are a very wise man," Dumbledore exclaimed. Locke didn't take the compliment too seriously. In fact, he had simply outlined his plan, following the plot, and the two of them felt it was a perfect solution, one that would not only perfectly resolve the issue but also provide Harry with some growth. The whole process seemed dangerous, but with proper care and advanced preparation, it wouldn't be a problem. After a moment's deliberation, Dumbledore approved the plan. Then, Dumbledore handed the Marauder's map to Locke and said, Next, you need to find a chance to give it to Harry. Just give it to me, Locke smiled, thinking to himself, actually, sometimes, it's quite fun to control everything behind the scenes. This time, I just went with the flow. Maybe I can try to set it up myself later, and maybe have some fun. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 Exchange. Sirius Black's magical proficiency was quite high, as he had been able to create the Marauder's map. Locke could tell that the map had been created using a very advanced tracking spell, as well as a revealing and an illusion spell. However, Locke had no idea what spells form the overall framework, so he asked Sirius about it. I used the contract charm on it, a spell unique to our family. Besides that, we used many other special spells to create it. Locke nodded, then examined the Marauder's map carefully for a moment. It should also have a permanent restoration charm enchantment. Indeed, I didn't expect you to see so much, Sirius said with surprise. He hadn't expected Locke, despite his youth, to be so knowledgeable. There are other spells, mostly related to those needed for map-making in the wizarding world. They come in sets. There's also a special, targeted spell. If you're interested, I could explain it to you. That's great. I was just thinking of asking, Locke said with a smile. In the wizarding world, it's common to keep family heirlooms or special spells secret, passing them down only to close friends. Although Locke had collected as much spell knowledge as possible, and the Hogwarts library was rich in variety, collecting every spell that was ever passed down, there were still many spells and magical knowledge that remained secret. Locke's proposal to stick with the original plot was a significant boon to Sirius. After years of suffering, Sirius saw that Locke's proposed plan could redeem him, and his gratitude to Locke was heartfelt. This opening made it possible for Locke to ask Sirius for advice on some spells. Locke had little knowledge of Sirius's family's secret contract spells and the accompanying spells for map creation. Sirius wasn't a stingy person, and after Locke's maneuvering, he became his benefactor. He promised to return home and lend Locke the relevant books once the matter was concluded. With this agreement in place, Locke became more concerned about the upcoming plan against Peter Pettigrew, but he also reminded him to take precautions against possible mishaps. For example, the finale should be conducted around a full moon, lest Professor Lupin accidentally transform into a werewolf. Dumbledore had mentioned Professor Lupin's werewolf status when he recommended him for a job at Locke's shop. He and Sirius had taken this reminder to heart. Locke also found it quite interesting that when Professor Lupin became the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, the first thing he taught his students was how to deal with werewolf attacks. Locke didn't know Professor Lupin's true mindset, but perhaps it was simply the result of specialization. The three of them finalized their plan in the headmaster's office, and Dumbledore finally asked Locke to help him find a place for Sirius. Locke readily agreed and left the office with Sirius, casting a disillusionment charm on him. He couldn't help but ask, "How did you get in and out of the school before?" "Where did you stay?" "The Whomping Willow," Sirius said without hesitation. "There's a tree hollow beneath the Whomping Willow, with a hidden passage leading directly to Hogsmeade." "I see," Locke nodded. Hogwarts was surrounded by various spells, making it difficult to sneak in unnoticed. This secret passage had been a secret for many years. Locke already knew this from the plot, but he had to ask, "Where did you live before?" "In the haunted house in Hogsmeade." Sirius sighed. "It's old, but it's much more restrictive than a cat's been. Until Peter Pettigrew is eliminated, none of this matters to me." Nodding, Locke said, "Then I'll take care of you, no problem." After their brief interaction, Sirius had already gained a deep trust in Locke, or rather, in Dumbledore. Since Dumbledore had asked Locke to take charge, he naturally had no objections. As a school trustee, Locke simply spoke to the janitor, Filch, and left the academy with Sirius, who had become invisible, to a house he had purchased near the school. It was merely a place to stay occasionally. Besides him and Hermione, 2 elves would regularly come to clean it, and Locke had simply set up security and protective spells. Locke first selected a guest room for Sirius, found a complete set of bedding, and finally, using magic to communicate, arranged for someone to prepare several suitable outfits for Sirius. Most importantly, he found him a wand and some Polyjuice potion from a potion shop, as Sirius was currently operating outside the home and needed to conceal his identity. Finally, Locke gave Sirius 200 gold galleons so he could buy the necessary items. Locke's arrangements were impeccable, and Sirius was deeply grateful. After all, he had spent 12 years in prison and it was rare for him to feel cared for. This made Sirius so excited that he expressed many words of gratitude. It took Locke some effort to calm him down and help him regain his composure. Locke was taking advantage of the man's downfall to lend a hand. In his opinion, the value of these items was far less than that of the man's family spells. As long as it achieved his goal, Locke didn't mind being more friendly. Sirius cleaned up, drank Polyjuice potion again, and went with Locke to the Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade to retrieve some items Sirius had left there. The nickname originated from Professor Lupin. Back when Lupin was a student, he would come here through a secret passage beneath a whomping willow to control his werewolf form on full moon nights. Hiding there, he would bite his own arms, suppressing his bestial nature with a pain. The resulting screams earned him the nickname the Shrieking Shack, a well-known haunted house. After everything was packed up, Locke stopped interfering in the plot, keeping a close eye on it, focusing on his studies and arranging his affairs as usual. Besides telepathy, transfiguration had been Locke's main focus lately. These spells were notoriously difficult to master, and performing them simultaneously was quite risky. With telepathy, a careless mistake could lead to madness from receiving too many voices, while with transfiguration, even the slightest error could result in irreversible changes, potentially even permanent changes. So even Locke often needs the elves to watch over him when he is practicing, so that if he encounters any unexpected situation, he can find a way to deal with it in the first time, or even ask Dumbledore for help. Chapter 218, Emptying the Magic World. For the next year, Locke played little role in the plot, aside from handing Harry Potter the Marauder's map. With such a casual approach to this mission, Locke expected his reward to be modest. But in this world, reward wasn't paramount. Having arrived in a mature magical system, he felt like a rat in a rice barn. The rewards he'd receive far outweighed the small reward. For example, this year, through Dumbledore, Locke successfully met Nicholas Flamel. After a period of interaction and trials, Locke began studying alchemy with him. While Locke was intensely studying, Sirius and Lupin, just as in the original storyline, successfully uncovered Peter Pettigrew's crimes. Meanwhile, Snape, through passive participation, finally understood the culprit behind Harry's mother's death. Pettigrew's fate was to be imprisoned in Azkaban, where he would receive free room and board for the rest of his life. Sirius, having proven his innocence, regained his freedom and received a substantial compensation from the Ministry of Magic. All of this was reported in the newspapers, and many wizards blamed the Ministry of Magic. Locke declined to comment. Besides the Ministry's own poor performance, it was also a department that was bound to be criticized. After all, even the dog would be dissatisfied after 3 years in charge. Finally, Sirius, having returned to normal life, came to the school and personally took Harry Potter back to London. He also invited Locke to his home. After entertaining Locke graciously, Sirius lent Locke the books on spells related to the Marauder's map, which he had promised Locke to copy, as a token of gratitude for his help during his most difficult times. Having arrived in this world for several years, Locke had a very regular life. During school hours, he spent most of his time studying or practicing spells at Hogwarts. During holidays, he traveled the world, collecting local specialties. After successfully becoming a disciple, Locke also received a very precious gift from Nicholas Flamel, a small, spacious suitcase. This small suitcase looked small, easily carried in one hand, and seemingly ordinary, yet it was meticulously crafted by Nicholas Flamel, made from the skin of a dragon king obtained by Nicholas Flamel many years ago. After Nicholas Flamel fixed a seamless extension of space on top, the space within the suitcase became enormous, exceeding 1,500 meters in length, width, and height, significantly larger than some modern residential areas. This space was significantly larger than Locke's own meager dimensional space. Crucially, after experimenting, Locke discovered that, unlike other items that had been seamlessly extended, this suitcase could be placed in the dimensional space, perhaps due to the quality of the materials, or perhaps Nicholas Flamel's superior alchemical skills, as it could actually fit into the dimensional space, a kind of nesting doll game. With such a large space, Locke's plan to empty out the wizarding world finally had its biggest obstacle removed. During the following vacation, Locke devoted considerable effort to designing the space within the suitcase. He primarily used various spells to add natural environments, such as the changing seasons, sunlight, moonlight, starry skies, and various weather conditions. Locke had a place to collect magical animals and plants, allowing them to thrive. He was incredibly busy, spending countless galleons and even enlisting the help of Nicholas Flamel, Dumbledore, and the professors at the academy, earning him considerable favors. The final result was promising. Once everything was ready, the only thing left was to fill the space with magical plants and animals. Locke also custom-made a host of wizarding items, such as clothing with automatic defenses or built-in commands, as well as magical props crafted from top-quality materials. These included not just Locke himself, but also wands and clothing for Peggy, with the goal of creating as many items and styles as possible. Hermione was aware of Locke's lavish plans, but she couldn't understand why Locke had created such a self-contained travel case. One day, noticing a change in Locke's mood, she had a sudden suspicion. "Teacher, are you leaving for Hogwarts?" Hermione suddenly asked. "Why do you think so?" Locke's heart skipped a beat, then he asked with a smile. "I've been watching what you've been doing lately, and I suddenly have a feeling you're leaving," Hermione said. "Are you going away, teacher?" "Yes," Locke thought for a moment and said, "I might be gone for a while, but what am I going to do then?" Hermione blurted out, her suspicions confirmed. "Don't worry, I'll be here for a few more years, and if I have the chance, I'll come back to see you," Locke said, ruffling Hermione's hair. "But when will you be back?" Hermione asked, gently tossing her head, enjoying Locke's caress. "It's mainly because the world is so big, and I want to see everywhere." Not knowing how to explain it to Hermione, Locke could only offer this vague excuse, "I really want to see the sights of different places." "No, I'll be with you, teacher," Hermione suddenly said. "What? Impossible," Locke blurted out. "Why not?" Hermione said anxiously. "Didn't you say we still have a few years? By then, I'll be able to graduate and travel with you, Professor, but if you travel with me, it'll probably take a long time to get back." Locke thought for a moment and could only say, "That means you won't be able to see your family and friends for a long time." Hearing this, Hermione couldn't help but hesitate, a conflicted look on her face. "But Professor, can't you stay? Or not be away for so long? It's a pity, too. After all, I have many friends at Hogwarts, especially you, little Hermione. But everyone has their own pursuits. I'm just going to pursue what I want. I've been studying magic so I can explore the wider world." But Hermione wanted to say something, but Locke stopped her. He didn't intend to tell Hermione about the space travel. If anyone knew Locke could travel to other worlds, who knew if some wizard would suddenly have the urge to target Locke? The best way to keep a secret is to never tell it. Sometimes, if a secret is casually revealed, it's no longer a secret. He didn't want to cause trouble. Chapter 219 Why do you like uniforms? Not wanting to talk too much with Hermione about leaving, Locke changed the subject. "You've heard, not long ago the Death Eaters caused a scene in the European Quidditch Cup final. I read the report in the newspaper, and Harry and Ron also told me a lot. I really didn't expect that something like this would happen." Hermione said this with some dissatisfaction in her tone. The people from the Ministry of Magic were really majestic when they arranged the Dementors in the school, but they were always helpless when they encountered Death Eaters making trouble. The Minister of Magic was still at the beginning of the game at that time. It is a tradition in many film and television dramas that the police are useless at critical moments, or arrive after the fact, Locke complained in his heart, and then said, "This has little to do with us, and you shouldn't talk nonsense outside, so as not to get into trouble." Speaking of which, the college is planning to hold a large-scale event this year. "I'm sure you will like it after listening to it." "What event is it?" Hermione asked. Locke smiled without saying anything, but this only intensified Hermione's curiosity. She immediately grabbed Locke's arm and said coquettishly, "Teacher, what exactly is this event? Don't hide it, keep on being curious." Seeing Hermione's rare coquettish tone, Locke was in a good mood and said with a smile, "I think you should be patient for a while. Once you get to school, Dumbledore will probably announce it at the dinner." This time, the return to school was earlier than usual, and the students arrived by train not at night as in previous years, but in the early morning. After the students arrived, they found that there were many guests at the school, all young men and women around their age. Seeing this, Hermione knew it was probably related to the event Locke mentioned. Although Hermione knew that she only needed to be patient to get the result, the thought only made her more curious. However, no matter what she tried, Locke refused to speak. Helpless, Hermione could only endure the cat-scratching feeling and wait until the start of term dinner. As expected, after the sorting, Dumbledore, in his speech ushering in the new school year, announced, "First, I have an announcement to make. This academic year, the castle will welcome a special group of guests. This year, Hogwarts has been chosen to host the Triwizard Tournament." Many students knew what the Triwizard Tournament was and immediately excitedly began discussing it. Some also explained it to those who didn't. The discussion lasted for 2 or 3 minutes before Dumbledore knocked on the podium, his clear sound silencing the chaotic chatter. Once the room quieted, he introduced the guests from other schools. The most eye-catching of all were, of course, the girls from Britain's Academy of Magic. They all wore cyan silk skirts and bonnets. Black stockings peeked down their calves beneath their long skirts. Their cyan high heels made a steady, crisp clicking sound, drawing a crowd of attention. Magical butterflies swirled and flickered around the girls as they moved, creating a magical sound and light show comparable to a large-scale stage performance. Locke thought to himself, no wonder so many people love uniforms. In many situations, uniforms are truly the best. These girls, though not necessarily the most beautiful, managed to capture the audience's attention. As they danced a few coordinated moves before leaving the stage, the boys in the audience couldn't help but applaud and cheer. The boys from Durmstrang School of Magic also caught the attention of many girls, some even screaming. After the introductions, Dumbledore announced some rules and let Locke know that the Goblet of Fire storyline was finally about to begin. Perhaps because of the guests, the dinner menu included a variety of ice creams and desserts like pudding, which, with Locke's sweet tooth, made him eat more. Hermione finally understood what Locke was talking about and was quite excited. However, the rules, which restricted participation to students over 17, made her feel a bit reluctant. Locke, on the other hand, was content to watch the fun, a happy spectator. Unlike the original storyline, Hermione, if it weren't for the restrictions, would have been very eager to sign up. The Triwizard Tournament isn't just for this year. There will definitely be future opportunities. You're still a little short of the mark, Locke could only offer some reassurance. The plot remained largely unchanged. Harry Potter's name had somehow appeared on the list of competitors. This unexpected development surprised even Dumbledore and sparked considerable controversy. Harry hadn't actually registered. According to the previously announced rules, his age had already disqualified him. The sudden appearance of a fourth name, in addition to the 3 champions, embarrassment for Hogwarts. Fortunately, Dumbledore had experienced many things, and despite calling out to Harry a little louder the second time, he managed to remain calm. But internally, Dumbledore was furious and worried. Besides the embarrassment of the school, the current situation clearly indicated someone was targeting Harry Potter. This unexpected event posed a potential danger to Harry. Through telepathy, Dumbledore realized Harry hadn't registered at all. He could only exchange glances with him before handing him the scrap of sheepskin with his name on it. Especially when thinking about the Death Eater's previous disturbance in Quidditch, Dumbledore felt that things were somewhat out of his control. As for Harry, he was regarded as a cheater by many people because everyone knew that he was not even 17 years old. Hermione was also surprised. She also knew that Harry had not signed up at all, which made her unable to help but ask, "What is going on?" Harry didn't want to participate at all. "It seems that our Mr. Harry's in trouble again." Locke shrugged his shoulders and said, "It should be some unexpected events that exceeded Headmaster Dumbledore's expectations. The troubles Harry encounters are never small. Too many people are watching him." "Really?" Hermione looked at Locke. "Who did it?" Locke certainly knew what was going on, but he still shook his head slightly. "It happened suddenly, and it is not clear who did it for the time being, but since his name appears, he must participate in the Triwizard Tournament. This is also the rule." But Hermione couldn't help but want to continue saying something, but was interrupted by Locke. "Principal Dumbledore knows what you said better than you. Since he didn't deny Harry's qualifications, it means that Harry must participate. The rules of the Triwizard Tournament are not just decided by Dumbledore alone. This is a rule that has been passed down." Chapter 220 Mission Time Limit. As Locke had predicted, Dumbledore and many others confirmed that Harry Potter had not registered and that someone was behind the scenes. However, according to the established rules, the Goblet of Fire selection could not be changed, so Locke became the 4th contestant. The Triwizard Tournament consisted of 3 competitions, to be held on November 24th, February 24th of the following year, and June 24th. These dates had been set long ago, but there was a slight twist. The teams from the 2 houses would arrive 2 months earlier than planned, rather than arriving in late October. The atmosphere within the house was lively because of the Triwizard Tournament, and some students from the other 2 magic schools were visiting, creating a new atmosphere for the Hogwarts students. The 3 champions naturally became the center of attention, and Harry, who was essentially labeled a cheater, faced significant pressure even after professors from all 3 schools had jointly refuted their claims. Amidst a commotion outside, Locke discussed the recent news with Dumbledore and Sirius Black. Sirius Black was called in because he was involved in this matter, Peter Pettigrew's escape from prison. Dumbledore asked him to come along to analyze whether there was a connection between the 2. Ever since Locke's successful design plan, Dumbledore had occasionally sought his opinion on certain matters. Locke had been involved in Peter Pettigrew's case, so Dumbledore decided to ask Locke's opinion. Besides the news of Pettigrew's escape, Sirius also revealed that Harry had dreamed of Voldemort, Peter, another person, and a giant python during his vacation. He didn't recognize the latter person, but in his dream, Voldemort had killed them with a spell, and ordered his men to capture Harry. Worried that Locke was just treating this as an ordinary nightmare, Sirius emphasized, Harry's dream this time was very special. Harry's scar caused severe pain after the nightmare. Precognitive dreams have always been popular in the wizarding world, Locke said slowly. There is some kind of special induction between Harry and Voldemort. Considering that the Death Eaters dared to come out and cause trouble in the Quidditch match, I think it is probably related to the Dark Lord. Dumbledore understood in his heart that it was probably one of Voldemort's Horcruxes that resurrected him. He was mentally prepared for this and was a little worried about Harry at this time. Only a powerful confounding charm could disrupt the Goblet of Fire. I think the 2 headmasters and Professor Moody are all suspects among those who came to the Academy this year. Locke offered a rather convincing analysis of the situation. Headmasters Maxime and Karkaroff have very distinct physical features that don't match the figure in Harry's nightmare. I think Professor Moody is the most likely suspect. Dumbledore found Locke's theory somewhat difficult to accept. Moody had always been on the front lines of the battle against the Death Eaters, and the scars on his body were a testament to his experience against them. Therefore, Dumbledore still trusted Professor Moody and had never considered him as the possible suspect. Locke wasn't surprised by this. He simply added a reminder, Professor Moody always carries a metal hip flask with him. Headmaster, do you think it contains Polyjuice Potion? Are you saying that Moody is in disguise? Dumbledore accepted this, though still quite surprised. Whether my suspicions are true or not, we just need to keep paying close attention. We'll probably find out something, Locke said. What you suggest is a strong possibility, but it's not yet definitively confirmed. The 2 headmasters also need to keep an eye on it. Dumbledore finally made his decision, then seemed to reflect on something. The 3rd round of the Triwizard Tournament is a maze. If anything truly is to be done, it would be best to do it there. Locke knew, of course, that the maze wasn't the key. The final trap was the trophy, which, upon Harry's touch, would teleport him directly to Voldemort's presence. Until then, Harry would be safe. Voldemort needed a living Harry, not a corpse, so Harry would be protected until then. Locke suspected this request was likely related to the remnant of Voldemort's spirit residing in Harry's mind. Using a Horcrux to resurrect him was obviously flawed, and the remnant of Voldemort within Harry was a fluke. Voldemort likely wanted to deal with this incident, and since it involved Horcruxes, Voldemort couldn't rely on someone else. The key now was finding the teleportation location, so Locke decided to observe and study the trophy to see if he could uncover the spell hidden within. Leave Harry's covert protection to me. After all, I'm not as conspicuous as you 2, Locke concluded. Leaving the principal's office, Locke noticed a system notification. It turned out his mission had a time limit. When the time was up, the mission would be over, and Locke would only be able to stay for a few days before returning to the American TV world. Originally, this notification wouldn't have been sent. Locke knew the Harry Potter storyline well. Finding and destroying the 7 Horcruxes wouldn't take that long. However, Locke seemed poised to stay in this world for years, right up until Harry Potter reached adulthood, so the system had to issue a notification. According to the system's information, his remaining time was shortly after the conclusion of the Triwizard Tournament. This meant he couldn't continue to idle away, It would be best to find an opportunity to dispose of all the Horcruxes, perhaps even earning a good mission rating. The system also indicated that some changes were expected in the American TV world, though the details would be revealed after Locke completed his mission and returned. Completing the mission wasn't too much of a hassle for Locke. The challenge lay in the remnant soul within Harry's body. Although the mission didn't warn what would happen if Harry was killed directly to destroy the Horcruxes, the fact that the mission description required helping Harry destroy Voldemort made Locke guess early on that if Harry died, the mission reward would definitely be terrible. This was also the biggest reason why Locke was willing to babysit the protagonist many times in the plot. In addition, Locke did care about the changes in the American TV world. If it weren't a major change, the system wouldn't specifically prompt him. But now he didn't even know what it was, so Locke could only put it aside, but regardless, he still cared about it. This made Locke understand why Hermione's attitude in recent days had clearly been very dissatisfied with him because she had deliberately kept it a secret on the first day of school. This feeling of having something on your mind and not knowing anything about it was really not a pleasant one. Chapter 221 I Promise You. Ever since learning of the time-limited mission, Locke became slightly more focused. He also prepared for his departure, accelerating his efforts to clear out the wizarding world. Time passed slowly, and 2 months had already passed. The first match of the Triwizard Tournament was largely unremarkable. Harry summoned a flying broomstick using the Moody's flying charm, luring the dragon away from the arena. Though disastrous, he ultimately secured a golden egg. It's true that Harry possessed considerable talent for flying, a resilient and courageous character, and top-notch wizarding abilities. However, due to his young age, he couldn't fully devote his attention to studying magic. Like many young wizards his age, he was distracted by other interesting pursuits. Furthermore, he had always faced powerful wizards, which made him seem somewhat hamstrung. He relied on his parents' legacy to escape danger several times, leading many to believe that he, the protagonist, was a bit of a stunner. Despite his dismal performance, his performance earned the approval of many of his classmates as a cheater. Furthermore, the danger he endured convinced Ron, who had previously misunderstood Harry, that Harry hadn't secretly registered. Harry, like the other 3 champions, became the center of attention in the castle. While he basked in the glory and joy, Locke discussed the details of the incident with Dumbledore. Regarding your earlier speculation, I've recently discovered some clues, Dumbledore said. Some ingredients for Polyjuice Potion, and even some finished products, have gone missing from Snape's personal storeroom. So, can we now confirm Professor Moody's authenticity? Not yet. He's been maintaining a clemency, and the alchemical eye he possesses is genuine. Ordinary contact won't confirm his authenticity, so, I'll have to keep a close eye on Harry. Locke nodded in understanding. Indeed, I have much to attend to. Protecting Harry will be up to you, Dumbledore said. I hope to follow him during the 3rd match. If Harry is in danger, I'll be able to bring him back safely as soon as possible. No problem, Locke nodded. The days passed slowly, and a month later, it was time for another traditional event at the college, the Yule Ball. The students were extremely excited for the dance, hoping it would allow them to find their own spring. The professors were also quite enthusiastic, even planning a makeshift dance training course for the event. Western popular culture doesn't strictly guard against premature love, and during the training, Professor McGonagall emphasized that the dance required ballroom dancing, which caused many students to groan. Okay, boys, this dance isn't complicated at all, Professor McGonagall, who also lived through this age, said with a touch of nostalgia. Dancing isn't as complicated as you might imagine. Inside every girl lies a swan, yearning to unleash its passion and soar. And inside you boys, there's a lion eager to take action. I believe each of you longs for a passionate and moving dance, and you surely want to dance with the girl of your dreams. What's wrong, Hermione? You don't seem quite right today, Locke asked, pouring her a glass of honey milk, as they had made their own hot pot instead of eating in the cafeteria. Hermione hesitated after taking a sip of the milk Locke offered her, then finally said, Teacher, a lot of senior students have been asking about you today. Really? Locke smiled but said nothing. Even though his charm stat was no longer displayed on the dashboard, it didn't mean it had disappeared. He had been a student since before arriving in this world, so he naturally understood the student's mentality. Should I tell them? Hermione couldn't help but pout at Locke's composure. Her bright brown eyes stared at Locke, as if trying to decipher his hidden thoughts. It's not that I don't like it, But I've been very busy lately and haven't had time for it, Locke said. There were some attractive girls among the seniors at Hogwarts, and it wasn't that Locke wasn't interested, but the magic of this world captivated his attention more at this stage. Really? Hermione asked tentatively. But there are quite a few seniors who have gifts for me to give you and invite you to the Yule Ball. Please help me decline them. I'm a bit busy lately. Locke waved his hand. I'm leaving Hogwarts soon, and I might not be back for the Yule Ball. What? Hermione, unsure whether to feel happy or disappointed at this answer, couldn't help but say, but I. Turning to look at Hermione, Locke instantly understood her intention. Under normal circumstances, Locke would have seen through it long ago. But for a while now, his mind was preoccupied with completing the system's tasks and filing his small suitcase before leaving. After all, compared to his current dimensional space, that small suitcase could hold far more. In fact, after spending so long in this world, Locke's magic power had increased significantly since he first arrived. After all, he'd consumed countless potions to aid his training, spending countless galleons on this. As Locke's magic power grew, so did his dimensional space. For example, his dimensional space was now more than double the size of the space he'd just entered Harry Potter's world. However, achieving the desired growth in such a short period of time was difficult. Locke estimated that if he wanted his dimensional space to exceed 1,000 meters in length, width, and height, at his current rate, it would take at least over a decade, and he only had about 6 months. Lately, Locke had been eyeing goblin crafts, but these goblins guarded their crafts very closely. If there was any chance of them being leaked, they would rather destroy them than let human wizards obtain them. With so many other things on his mind, Locke didn't immediately notice Hermione's subtle intentions. Locke initially approached Hermione to better understand the plot dynamics. Of the 3 main characters, direct contact with Harry Potter would have aroused Dumbledore's vigilance. As for Ron, he was born into a wizarding family from the beginning, so it was not easy to find a suitable point of contact. However, after being together for so long, there must be feelings. Thinking that he would be leaving in more than half a year at most, Locke smiled, rubbed her head, and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely be back for the dance tonight. It's just that time is tight and it's not easy to find a suitable female companion. I wonder if you have time to accompany me. There must be a lot of boys who have invited you." "Indeed, many people have invited me." Hermione raised her head happily, "but since you asked, Professor, I will agree to it." Chapter 222 Really Ugly. Ever since she couldn't contain her excitement and shared the news that Locke would be his partner at the Yule Ball, Hermione had become the target of widespread criticism, and her days had been tough. Hermione hadn't anticipated the fact that even many of the girls at Foxbritons harbored a lingering grudge against her. Fortunately, the Yule Ball was just around the corner. Locke, a man of means, had invited Hermione, and naturally, he'd made every effort to prepare, purchasing exquisite gowns for both him and Hermione. Hermione chose a light-colored dress, her long blonde hair tied high and accessorized with a matching cape. With her naturally beautiful appearance, she would have been the most striking woman at a ball if she weren't still young and immature. Locke wore a standard dress and suit, custom-made for her. This also caught the attention of many of the girls who had long noticed him, and many were surprised that such a distinguished man existed in the academy. The ball began, and dancing proved no challenge. Locke guided Hermione in a graceful dance to the rhythm of soothing music. Hermione's dress spun with dazzling grace, like a dancing elf. Then, their dresses activated their enchantment, radiating a dazzling magical glow that captivated everyone in the room. Those around them were stunned by the magnificent spectacle, and after a moment, they regained their composure and continued dancing with their partners, their hearts filled with envy and amazement. After the ball, evocative sounds echoed through the hidden rooms, woods, and underbrush of Hogwarts Castle. As Locke, leading the delighted Hermione, prepared to leave for a rest, they encountered a disgruntled Ron and a girl standing beside him. "Mr. Locke, don't you think you're too old for Hermione?" Ron bit his lip and finally uttered. "Ron." Hermione couldn't help but glare at Ron, shouting, "What are you talking about?" "All right, Hermione." Locke smiled, rubbed Hermione's head, and said, "Ron, you should pay more attention to your partner. Let's go." Locke took Hermione's hand and walked around Ron. He naturally wouldn't be jealous of a little boy. After they left, Ron's partner couldn't help but glare at him angrily. "You don't want to dance with me, do you?" Ron remained silent. To be fair, his partner was also a beautiful girl. She agreed to dance with Ron and didn't complain about Ron's somewhat antique dress. She must have a good impression of him. But Ron's current behavior made her turn away. I didn't expect Ron to be so rude. You saved him and Harry in the Forbidden Forest before, Hermione couldn't help but say. I must talk to him about it when we get back. It doesn't matter. I know what he is thinking now, because I stole his best dance partner. Locke smiled and said, do you know what I was thinking when I was dancing just now? What? Hermione asked curiously before she could react to what Locke meant by the best dance partner in his mind. I've been wondering if I should invite you to join me on my trip, but I'm also worried you might not see your parents and friends for a long time. Really? Hermione seemed pleasantly surprised. I think I have no problem with that. I want to see just how big the world is with you, teacher. Don't worry, I'll probably be leaving at the end of this semester. I'll tell you where I'm going then, and you can make your decision later. Locke smiled. For now, just enjoy life at Hogwarts. Locke had actually been hesitant about whether to take Hermione with him. After all, he had a soft spot for her, and visiting the Harry Potter world without trying to abduct her seemed a bit unproductive. Locke didn't intend to hide it. He would let Hermione make her own choice. Before leaving, he would explain the situation to Hermione and let her decide for herself whether to join Locke in this completely unfamiliar world. 2 months passed quickly, and the second game was approaching. One day, Locke was preparing to go to the room of requirement to practice spells when he saw Harry, alone, staring blankly at a railing. He went over and said, hello, Harry, why haven't you rested yet? Are you wandering here alone at night and daydreaming, Mr. Locke? Harry came back to his senses and greeted Locke. No, nothing. Harry, as always, was the kind of person who would keep things to himself, and replied, I was just thinking about something. Is there anything I can help with? Locke offered. After hesitating for a moment, Harry shook his head. Just some small things. Are you worried about the second game? You should have thought that the mermaid singing in the golden egg means that the second game is related to water. What are you thinking about? Can't you think of any way to deal with the game? That unbearable noise is the mermaid singing. Harry couldn't help but be stunned and asked in surprise. You probably don't know much about mermaids, so you don't know he is a mermaid. In fact, the singing of mermaids becomes a shrill noise after leaving the water. Magical creatures have all kinds of characteristics. Locke smiled and said, if you can't think of a way to deal with it, I have a book to recommend to you, or you can ask Hermione. She should know some ways. Really? Thank you, Mr. Locke. I didn't expect that the sound was the singing of a mermaid. I thought it was the effect of some spell. Harry's face showed excitement. I'm sorry, sir. I suddenly thought of something and wanted to go back. Okay, but don't go on night tours casually in the future. Locke didn't say much. After he left, he frowned slightly. That fake Professor Moody hasn't given him a clue yet? Indeed, the plot did not specify which day he prompted Locke to go to the bathroom, and secretly told the ghost the answer. I didn't expect that it would be a few days before the second game. Locke, who inadvertently played the role of a fake Professor Moody, didn't care about this little thing. He continued to go to the room of requirement and waited for the second game. All the teachers and students gathered together in the center of the Black Lake. In the cold wind, the 4 contestants gathered together on the platform. The referee read out the rules of the game, stating that the 4 warriors had lost something precious and they had to find it back within an hour. After the 4 contestants entered the water, everyone tried to look down from the lake, but because of the magic, they could not see anything except darkness. Locke knew that the Black Lake surrounding Hogwarts was not only a sanctuary for magical creatures, but also had some magical passages that could even connect to other waters around the world. The people the 4 warriors needed to rescue were in the area of the Black Lake, where the mermaids were active. Locke also collected some mermaids in his small suitcase. To be honest, the mermaids in this world were not as beautiful as those in fairy tales. They were really ugly, with slender bodies like water snakes and bulging eyes. Seeing them could destroy all a person's beautiful fantasies about mermaids. Chapter 223 Attack and Handling. The second match went smoothly. Although Harry only came in second, he received considerable praise for helping to save Fleur's sister, who had already been defeated. However, Locke was summoned to Dumbledore's office for a discussion. The body of Barty Crouch, director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, had been found in the Forbidden Forest. A preliminary examination revealed that a killing curse had been cast upon him. This was somewhat ironic. While the dark arts were considered taboo in the wizarding world, The 3 unforgivable curses were widely known, and practically every wizard of reasonable ability knew and practiced them. To avoid alarming the students, both the Academy and the Ministry of Magic suppressed the news, stating only that Director Crouch was unable to referee due to other duties. Afterward, Locke consulted with Dumbledore for a long time, and one day, he approached Harry alone. "Can we talk privately?" "What's the matter, Mr. Locke?" Harry asked, following Locke. "It's mainly about the competition." When they arrived, Locke said, "Harry, you must have always been curious about why your name appeared in the Goblet of Fire." "Of course." Harry Potter nodded. Mr. Locke, do you know anything? "Principal Dumbledore and I have been investigating this matter. We now have some guesses. If we have any definite news, we will definitely let you know," Locke said slowly. "I called you here this time to tell you that the masterminds behind this matter should be related to the Death Eaters. Since they did such a thing, they obviously plan to do something to you in the competition. The third game is the last chance." "Sir, you mean?" Harry's face became nervous as he listened. "Don't worry, I have already communicated with Principal Dumbledore. During the competition, I will secretly watch you. At the same time, you need to remember one thing. If I do anything, you need to remain calm and trust me. Do you understand?" But Harry suddenly felt a little confused. He didn't understand what Locke meant. "Just keep this in mind. You can also check with Headmaster Dumbledore," Locke said. "Next, prepare for the competition. Headmaster Dumbledore and I will take care of everything else." "Okay, Mr. Locke," Harry nodded. He didn't fully trust Locke, but since Dumbledore had arranged this, he decided to go back and ask the headmaster about it. The third competition would be held in 4 months. During this period, Locke would mysteriously disappear from time to time and was often unseen. Even at Hogwarts, he spent most of his time in the Room of Requirement. On June 24th, the third competition would take place within a massive maze. This maze, created by the combined efforts of numerous professors at the Academy, was filled with magical cash, as well as numerous aggressive magical plants and creatures. Of course, most of these magical plants and creatures wouldn't kill directly, so patrolling wizards could quickly rescue them in the event of an emergency. 4 champions would enter the maze from each of the 4 entrances in the center and claim the competition trophy. The order of entry was determined based on the results of the previous 2 competitions. Professor Moody was in charge of placing the trophy. Seizing this opportunity, he cast a spell upon it, causing any Harry Potter who touched it to be instantly transported to Voldemort's presence. The 4 of them each chose their own entrance. Dumbledore glanced at Professor Purpose, who was whispering something to Harry, and then gave Locke a look. Locke nodded silently, and the countdown began. However, Dumbledore had just called one when Filch, the gun salute leader, suddenly lit the fuse. As the salute exploded, the 4 contestants quickly entered the maze. Filch, facing Dumbledore's helpless gaze, feigned an innocent shrug. Hearing the command from the field, Locke found a secluded position, quietly transformed into a bird, and entered through Harry's chosen passage, quickly spotting him. The maze was vast, and it took Harry from morning until dusk to reach its center. He watched as Harry evaded numerous traps and outmaneuvered numerous magical creatures, a process far more complex than depicted in the films. At that moment, a scream erupted from a distance. Harry recognized it as the voice of another contestant, Fleur. Harry hesitated for a moment before dashing over. Locke knew Fleur had been attacked by Krum, who was under the Imperious Curse. Harry hesitated for a moment before dashing over, but Locke was even quicker, arriving at the scene just in time to see Krum casting a spell on Fleur with his wand. Locke recovered, quickly approaching from behind, and struck Krum in the back of the neck, knocking him unconscious. He then crouched down to check on Fleur, who lay on the ground. "Are you alright, Miss Delacour?" Fleur lay there gasping for breath for a long moment before speaking weakly. "Krum actually used the Cruciatus curse on me." Fleur was also in disbelief. She had never expected Krum to use the unforgivable curse on her. "I noticed it just now. I noticed that Mr. Krum's eyes had turned grayish-white. He must have been under the Imperious Curse," Locke said with feigned seriousness. "It's clear something serious has happened. Someone is targeting the contestants, and that's why Mr. Krum is being manipulated. My duty is to maintain order and the safety of the students. I've just signaled, and someone will be here soon. But Miss Delacour, can you continue the competition now?" Fleur wanted to continue, but she was so weak that she couldn't even sit up. "It seems you're no longer in a good condition to compete," Locke said, casting a healing spell in several wards. I've cast a ward on you. Someone should be here in 5 minutes at most. Wait here and explain what's happening. I need to find the other 2 contestants, they might also be in trouble." Fleur simply nodded silently. Things had come to this point, and even though she was reluctant, she had no choice but to accept the outcome. Harry also rushed over. Seeing Locke standing there, and Fleur and Crumb lying on the ground, he was also slightly startled. "Ms. Delacour was attacked by Crumb, who is under the Imperious curse. I have subdued him, Harry. I have contacted someone to deal with it." "Harry, you continue the game now." "What?" Harry couldn't help but be surprised. Locke gave him a brief explanation, and even showed him Crumb's eyes, looked at Locke, and continued the game at Locke's urging. At this time, due to Locke's signal, the wizards patrolling nearby had already arrived. Locke could only explain again, have Crumb and Fleur sent back first, and then sent a message to Dumbledore, and then quickly caught up with Harry. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 I Will Be Back. After leaving Fleur's sight, Locke quickly transformed into a bird again, but this time he didn't follow Harry Potter. He and Dumbledore had been searching for Voldemort's whereabouts, and Locke had even been secretly exploring the graveyard. Perhaps its location was hidden, and Locke hadn't yet discovered it. He had no choice but to follow the original plot and go through the trophy with Harry, naturally preparing there. The final stretch of the maze was a matter of moments for Locke. During this process, he also found another contestant, Cedric, and cast a stunning spell on him. While this would prevent him from winning the trophy, it was better than losing his life. After completing this, Locke stood by the trophy and disappeared. After waiting for about half an hour, Locke saw Harry appear. Upon seeing the glowing trophy, he gasped, but his face lit up with excitement. After a moment's pause, he reached the trophy and reached for it. The moment he touched the trophy, he suddenly felt dizzy and felt a presence beside him, a hand resting on his. Recognizing this as a portkey teleportation sensation from previous experiences, he quickly adjusted his movements. When he reached his destination, he fell to the ground again due to inertia, tumbling twice before coming to rest. When he regained his composure, he realized he wasn't in a competition venue, but a cemetery. His smile, ready to greet cheers, faltered. He glanced at the tombstone, the name and time engraved on it, and a sense of foreboding washed over Harry, causing him to ignore the momentary sensation of teleportation. The next moment, a pounding headache forced him to kneel down, clutching his forehead. A large, wine jar-shaped cauldron standing nearby suddenly erupted in flames, its contents rapidly boiling. The flames revealed a familiar figure, Peter Pettigrew. "Good evening, Harry," Pettigrew grinned triumphantly, pointing his wand at Harry. "We meet again, it's you." Harry, swallowing the pain, looked at Peter. "You did all this." "I was simply following my master's orders." Pettigrew held a terrifying, baby-like figure in one hand. Harry immediately recognized it as Voldemort. Pointing his wand at Harry, forcing him to retreat, Pettigrew used a transfiguration spell, using the statue behind Harry to restrain him. Then, Voldemort urged, "Hurry, begin now." "Yes, my master." Then, Pettigrew performed a ritual using the bones of Voldemort's father, his own flesh, and Harry's blood. With a frenzied look in his eyes, he recited the final ritual spell, then shouted, "Dark Lord shall be reborn." Flames enveloped the ritual cauldron, eventually dissolving into a black mist, from which Voldemort's figure gradually condensed and took shape. Standing with his back to Harry, he took a deep, relishing breath before saying, "My wand, Wormtail, as you command, my lord." Peter Pettigrew quickly produced a wand that looked like it was made of bone and bowed. Just as Voldemort was about to take his wand from Peter Pettigrew, Locke suddenly appeared behind him. Bang! With a dull thud, Voldemort felt a sharp pain in his back. The immense force toppled him forward, pinning Pettigrew beneath him. Locke, not waiting for either man to react, cast a spell, knocking Pettigrew unconscious. Then, using a scythe, he drew both Pettigrew and Voldemort's wands to his side and collected them. He grabbed Voldemort by the collar and lifted him up. Then, smiling, he greeted Harry Potter. "Hello, Harry, Mr. Locke." Harry looked at Locke in surprise. "Of course it's me. You should have noticed that I came here with you." Locke said as he threw Voldemort to the ground with such force that Voldemort couldn't help but scream. At this time, Locke squatted down, pinched Voldemort's ear, and said with a smile, "This is the nth time we have met, Mr. Bald. I just don't know if you have any memories before the other Horcruxes were destroyed, otherwise you should be very impressed." "Who are you?" Voldemort said in a hoarse voice. "You actually succeeded in a sneak attack and hurt me, the greatest Dark Lord?" "Dark Lord?" Locke stared at Voldemort without any hesitation and said, "You are just a reptile hiding in the gutter. Because you dare not face the light, you call yourself the king in your own little world. Kill him, Locke," Harry couldn't help but say at this time. "Don't worry, let me have a good chat with Tom," Locke said with a smile. "Speaking of which, Harry, I watched you risk your life against this guy. It's said that the entire wizarding world fears his power, but now he seems like a pitiful creature lying on the ground." "Hey, it seems you're a very confident fellow," Voldemort said grimly. "Then Mr. Voldemort, equally confident, seems to be in a bad state right now," Locke said, reaching out and placing a hand on his arm. With a crisp sound, the bones of one of his arms were crushed, and he lay limp on the ground. Locke then patted his face and said, "No one told you that you're like a dog, crawling on the ground now." Locke continued to perform the same method, crushing the bones in both of Voldemort's legs. He then stood up and said inexplicably, "It seems like a new friend has arrived." As he spoke, Locke suddenly reached out and accurately grasped the throat of the python, which was twice the thickness of an adult's arms and had attacked him from behind, and then used his strength to swing it several times. The python seemed boneless, limply sprawled on the ground. "Don't be so impatient. Things like this are best handled one at a time. Since this, Ms. Nagini, you've volunteered, learning the basilisk's name through divine perception," Locke casually produced a sword from space and pointed it at its vital point. "Since you're so anxious to be reincarnated, I'll give you a ride. I hope you'll make many new friends in hell." "No." Amidst Voldemort's furious roar, Locke plunged his sword into its vital point. With a mournful hiss, the giant python turned into a puff of black ash. Harry, restrained nearby, was speechless due to Locke's spell. He could only stare in astonishment at Locke, who seemed to be showing pity, as he looked at the python's previous location. Then he looked back at Voldemort, stuffed the one he had just snatched into his only intact hand, and pointed it at Harry. "Honestly, I was amused by the poor performance of your previous Horcruxes. Is this the case with the Dark Lord, who so many people fear? Every time, like now, the weapon is in your hand, the wand is pointed at your enemy, and all you need is a spell to solve the problem. But every time, you just give your head away, as if to boost Harry's reputation and make his name even more famous." Avada Kedavra. At this moment, Voldemort, perhaps unable to bear the humiliation, roared in anger and released such a spell, which instantly hit Harry Potter. The next moment, looking at the seemingly motionless Harry Potter, he suddenly seemed to be too stimulated and laughed heartily. "As a reward, giving you this life is no big deal. I will be back." Chapter 225. Today is a good day. I will be back. That's a classic statement, but your bald head doesn't look like the governor's. "At least the bald head doesn't look good enough." Locke said something Voldemort couldn't understand, then laughed. "Actually, you just did me a big favor. As the last Dark Lord, I'll let you be a bit more understanding." As he spoke, Locke first snatched Voldemort's wand back, broke it, and threw it aside. Then he pointed at the statue that trapped Harry Potter. Hearing a barely audible cry of pain, Locke curled his lips. "All right, Harry, stop pretending. You're too young. You're not even close. You need to learn." With that, Locke crushed Voldemort's last arm and pointed his head at Harry's position. Expelliarmus, Harry, lying motionless on the ground, suddenly reached out, wand raised, and blasted Locke with a curse. But Locke, who had been prepared, was unlikely to fall for it. He cast an shield charm, knocking his spells away. Then, watching Harry cast spells like shattered to pieces, fainted, and shattered, he repelled them one by one. "All right, put your wands away when you've had enough fun. I've already sent a message to Headmaster Dumbledore. I guess he's already there, waiting for us to return." "Huh?" Harry was a little confused by Locke's attitude. He had just been instigating Voldemort to cast the killing curse on him, so why was he acting like this now? "Do you think I'm a fool? It took me a long time to uncover the secret information, one that even Voldemort himself doesn't know. Harry, the spell your mother cast on you was very special. It protected you, causing Voldemort to die from the backlash of the spell, But it also left a fragment of his soul in you. Locke pointed at the scar on Harry's forehead. That's why you often have dreams about Voldemort, and they're so vivid. It's because of the connection between our souls. But to safely remove this soul, Voldemort must cast the killing curse on you himself. The Horcruxes Voldemort created allow him to be resurrected multiple times, but because his soul is incomplete, his character flaws are magnified, making his emotions even more uncontrollable. I just deliberately provoked him to do this. Harry, the honest child, finally believed Locke's explanation. After all, with Locke's strength, dealing with him wouldn't require such a hassle. Seeing Harry put away his wand, Locke lifted Voldemort and Peter Pettigrew in one hand each, allowing Harry to use the trophy to carry the two captives back to the scene. Several people reappeared at the entrance of the maze. Almost a moment someone appeared, cheers broke out from the audience, and the band immediately began to play. However, the next second, seeing the person appear, both the cheers and the music suddenly stopped. Everyone looked at the scene before them, not knowing how to react. At this time, Locke nodded to Dumbledore and glanced at Professor Moody. Expelliarmus. The next moment, Dumbledore pointed his wand at Professor Moody. Before he could react, Dumbledore cast another binding curse, instantly controlling him. The audience was in an uproar, not knowing how to react. Everyone, be quiet. At this moment, Dumbledore used amplification magic to muffle all the noise, then said, everyone will soon receive an explanation of what has happened. After saying this, Dumbledore approached Locke and, examining the Voldemort in Locke's hands, could not help but exclaim, I didn't expect you to be able to capture him. It was just a surprise attack. Taking advantage of his resurrection, Locke said nonchalantly. He actually didn't mind using sneak attacks against his enemies, as long as the effect was good enough. Disapparating charm, Locke chanted at Professor Moody. Soon, with a cry of pain, Professor Moody transformed into a different appearance. It's Barty Crouch Jr. Oh my god, someone nearby quickly recognized him, and the Ministry of Magic staff stared in amazement at Professor Moody's revealed appearance. How about Mr. Locke explain everything to everyone next? Dumbledore gestured to Locke. Okay, Headmaster Dumbledore. Locke threw Voldemort and Peter Pettigrew to the ground, then pointed at Barty Crouch Jr. and said, I believe everyone is familiar with this Death Eater. Some time ago, he and Peter Pettigrew escaped from prison, then transformed into Professor Moody and sneaked into Hogwarts. During the Triwizard Tournament, he deliberately threw Harry Potter's name into the Goblet of Fire for only one thing. After a slight pause, Locke pointed to Voldemort, whose limbs had been shattered, that is to work with Peter Pettigrew to resurrect our famous Mr. Voldemort, the bald one. Now everyone stared in shock at Voldemort, who was lying on the ground and couldn't even stand up. Some people even screamed in fear, and the whole scene became chaotic in an instant. Quiet, Locke used an amplifying spell to suppress everyone's voices, and then pointed his wand at Voldemort. Then Mr. Voldemort, do you have any last words? Voldemort's eyes were red at this time. He rolled his eyes and glanced around, then said in a sinister tone, I remember what all of you look like. When I come back next time, I swear to destroy every one of you. As soon as the words fell, the whole scene became chaotic again like an explosion. Many people screamed shrilly, their faces turned pale, and even those in the Ministry of Magic showed fear in their eyes. Return again, Locke chuckled. I don't think you'll have that chance, really. Voldemort turned his head with an effort to look at Locke, grinning. Who can say for sure? Actually, during our previous encounter, I was constantly using my telepathy on you. For a moment, I triggered you, causing you to lose your mind and lose your ability to maintain occlumency. That gave me some interesting information. Locke was simply making up an excuse. As a veteran wizard, Voldemort's occlumency had always been so well maintained that it had become almost instinct. But Locke's words now made him wonder if he had truly been caught by Locke. Sure enough, Locke then spoke slowly, his voice drawn out, you have 7 Horcruxes, shut up. At this point, even Voldemort himself was convinced he had accidentally let the cat out of the bag. He was stunned, then roared in fury. You seem a little guilty, Mr. Dark Lord, Locke chuckled. In Harry Potter's first year, I destroyed one of your soul fragments. In your second year, Harry destroyed your diary Horcrux. I told you to shut up. Voldemort's voice was shrill, filled with anger and barely concealed panic. At that moment, Snape, standing nearby, suddenly waved his wand and sealed Voldemort's mouth, preventing him from speaking. Glancing at Snape with a chuckle, Locke continued, This is your third Horcrux. The giant python I killed in the graveyard also harbored a fragment of your soul. And I goaded you into destroying the soul that remained in Harry Potter. This means you only have 2 Horcruxes left. Dumbledore's eyes flickered with surprise as Locke publicly revealed Voldemort's most deeply hidden secrets, especially the most troublesome one, the destruction of the remaining soul in Harry Potter. He then turned to Locke, wanting to know the whereabouts of the last 2 Horcruxes. Destroying them would mean Voldemort's complete demise, and the years-long struggle would finally come to an end. As for the last 2 Horcruxes, they're actually not that difficult to obtain, right? Locke said, reaching out and pulling out a box containing a necklace. The Slytherin pendant. By chance, I stumbled upon it while visiting Sirius's home. I felt it seemed to hold special magical powers, and I became interested in studying it. Sirius, not quite sure what it was, gave it to me as a gift. But to my surprise, it turned out to be one of your Horcruxes. Is this fate? And of course, there's the final Horcrux, the Ravenclaw item. You tricked the castle ghost, the Grey Lady, into crafting it into a Horcrux. It's currently in a room at Hogwarts. Just imagine how long it will take Professor Dumbledore and I to find it. Just a reminder, I've spent almost half of the last year or 2 in the Chamber of Secrets. At this point, Locke suddenly squeezed Slytherin's pendant with all his might. The immense magical force instantly shattered it. A ghostly shriek echoed, and a vast cloud of black mist dissipated, vanishing into thin air. He then looked at Voldemort, who arched his back in agony. So, Mr. Dark Lord, are you ready to revise your will? Then, Locke turned to Snape. Professor, I leave Peter Pettigrew in your care. Snape, ignoring the Ministry members nearby, was momentarily stunned by Locke's words. Without waiting for anyone to react, he pointed his wand at Pettigrew. With a single blast, Pettigrew's body shattered into a cloud of ash. Severus Snape, Dumbledore couldn't help but exclaim. You shouldn't be so impulsive. Snape shook his head silently. This had been a long-held thorn in his side, but the consequences were still within his control. Then we have our Dark Lord, Locke said, looking at Voldemort. I believe only by witnessing his death can the wizarding world's fear of him be lifted. You are right. Leave this to me. Dumbledore took a deep breath, drew his wand, and pointed it at Voldemort. Shattered to pieces, the spell instantly struck Voldemort. Even with his mouth sealed, Voldemort roared in despair, his eyes wide, but his life force quickly faded. The next moment, Voldemort's body crumbled to ash. Silence fell over the entire arena. Locke looked at Harry, seeing a look of relief on his face. With everything settled, Locke glanced around, clapped his hands, drawing everyone's attention, and said, well, from now on, there is no Voldemort in the wizarding world, and no one needs to worry about the Dark Lord anymore. So today is a good day, isn't it? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.